All right, good evening. I'd like to call the June 27th meeting of the Parks and Recreation Commission to order. Can we begin with a roll call?
Vice Chair Brown.
Here.
Commissioner Cribbs.
Here.
Commissioner Freeman.
Here.
Commissioner Kleinhaus.
Yes.
Commissioner Oche.
Present, please.
And Commissioner Way.
Here.
Vice Chair, that's 6 present.
Great. Just noting that Chair Greenfield is absent. Moving on to public comment. This portion of the meeting is reserved for persons wishing to address the commission on any matter that is not on the agenda. If you have a comment on the agenda item, please hold it until we get to that item. You may either raise your hand on Zoom or fill out a speaker card in person. Do we have any public comments? All right, seeing none. Moving on to agenda changes, additions, and deletions. Does anyone on the commission have any adjustments to the agenda? Great, seeing none. Moving right along onto the approval of the minutes. First, the draft minutes from the May 12th special meeting. Any comments? Changes?
I have some questions. I'm not so sure this is the appropriate place for them, but there were things listed in the minutes that I'm not so sure that we have. One was the action plan that was going to be distributed to commissioners, I thought I read. And also the other one was the binders that we were looking for from the master plan.
Okay.
So I don't know whether that should be part of the question during the minutes or it should be part of a question during the staff report. So
I think we'll just make a note for staff, Darren, if that's okay. All right.
okay, thank you.
Anything else? Okay. Do we have a motion?
Oh, I move to approve.
Great.
I'll second.
Great. All right. Roll call.
Vice Chair Brown.
Yes.
Commissioner Cribbs.
Yes.
Commissioner
Yes.
Freeman.
Yes.
Commissioner Kleinhaus.
Yes.
Commissioner Oche.
Yes, please.
Commissioner Way.
Yes.
Vice Chair, that's a 6-0 vote.
Great. Moving on to the minutes from May 24th. Any comments, changes? Okay. Do we have a motion?
I'll make a motion.
Great.
I'll second.
Thank you. All right. Roll call.
Vice Chair Brown.
Yes.
Commissioner Cribbs.
Yes.
Commissioner Freeman.
Yes.
Commissioner Kleinhaus.
Yes.
Commissioner Oche.
Yes, please.
Commissioner Way.
Yes.
Vice Chair, that's a 6-0 vote.
Great. Thank you. Moving on to department report.
Thank you, Vice Chair. Darren Anderson with Community Services Department. Good evening, everybody. Recruitment, we're still recruiting for the same positions we have been for the last 3 meetings. That's 2 assistant rangers and 1 open space technician and that division manager position. I hope to have better news next time we meet that we're moving along the process. Some updates on recreation programming. We've got the CSD summer camps that began on June 5th and they're up and running and going well. We've got the Twilight concert series this summer, Rinconada Park. We still have the August 5th and 12th, and then at Mitchell Park, July 1st and July 8th. And both those concerts are starting from 6:30 to 8 p.m. Family movie nights are coming up soon. These are all in Mitchell Park and free to attend. July 7th, we have the DC League of Super Pets. July 21st, Minions, The Rise of Gru. August 11th, Strange World, and August 25th, Super Mario. The 4th of July event, this is the Chili Cook-Off and Summer Festival at Mitchell Park from 11 a.m. to 3 p.m. And you can find more information from the website. But they will have live music, food trucks, games, and chili tasting, although the chili is limited availability. And commissioners should have received an email from Adam Howard inviting you to judge if you'd like to. So if you could please let him know as soon as possible if you would like to take him up on that. And you can just email Adam directly if somehow you missed the email. He reminded me that judges can expect to be at the park at 10:30 a.m. and stay until about 3 p.m. He also noted that 7 chili teams signed up this year.
How many?
7. Some updates on projects, the skate park analysis. This is the same place I was at last time, but a little further along in conversations with the contractor who has submitted a bid for doing this. I met with transportation and planning to refine the scope a little bit. So we're still having the conversation with the contractor and will likely need to adjust the scope a little bit more. So still working on that. The 2850 West Bayshore project, the new sewer line installation's been completed, which is great to have them done. Now they've got the longer part, which is regrowing the grass that they impacted while doing the sewer fixes. So that's about 6 to 7 weeks. They'll be reseeding very soon. And then it's the slow process of letting the seed grow into grass healthy enough to withstand before we take the fences down. And again, about 6 to 7 weeks. I let you know about the infill issue at Mayfield Soccer Fields. This was the old infill, which had mostly been removed and new infill was put in. The minor amounts that remained slowly work their way to the surface and are melting. So our staff have been removing those. Hopefully we'll exhaust the remaining supply relatively soon and it will no longer be an issue. But right now we're doing a Monday through Friday every day. Parks team comes in, grooms the field and takes off the coming this weekend. And so we'll see how the field responds, but we'll be doing our very best. And again, we did communicate with the leagues and provided rakes so they can help supplement some of the efforts. Let's see, whoops. I also let the commission know about this aggressive coyote behavior that's been happening at Pearson Rasadero Preserve. And this is with dogs, visitors with dogs, and the coyotes are acting aggressively towards them. And so we've temporarily prohibited dogs visiting the preserve until this is resolved. We consulted with Palo Alto Animal Services and with Department of Fish and Wildlife Service to get their recommendations, and both had said, given that this is happening in multiple places in the preserve, we recommend closing it for the interim until this is resolved. We've had this happen many times in the past, but usually it's been very localized to a particular trail, perhaps where the coyote was denning, and when dogs would come by, they'd be aggressive, and we just closed that one. But this one's a little different. This is the first time I've had this in my experience. That was 3 separate, by a good margin, portions of the preserve that led us to do the comprehensive closure. We have heard from a lot of visitors who are frustrated and they want to come in with their dogs, but for their safety, the safety of their pets and the coyotes right now, this is the best recommendation. My colleague, Mike Warner, who I'll introduce more when we get to the foothills topic, is the supervising ranger. He and his team will be doing the reanalysis to see when we can open the preserve up, or perhaps portions of it. We'll let you know as soon as we have more information. Also on June 12th, the City Council approved the Parks and Recreation Commission work plan. Some of our capital projects, I have the long list, but really only one that's got an update. And so I'll give you a little bit on that. That's the Baylands Boardwalk pile repair project. The pilings, and I'll show you a graphic in a second because I tried explaining this to someone else and it didn't make sense without some drawings. So I'll get into more detail on that. But we met with the regulatory agencies on June 14th to discuss permitting for the project and concepts of what the repair might look like. And really fortunate that they were very understanding. They had been involved in the original conversation that led us to go down the pathway of using Alaskan yellow cedar, which is the piling material of natural wood. In the past, it had been treated wood, which resists rot and resists invasion. Unfortunately, on the left photo, you can see the end of our boardwalk. And on the right 2 photos is one of the pilings that has been eaten away by shipworms. And you can see it's fairly significant, the amount that was removed. We had originally been informed that the Alaskan yellow cedar was naturally protective in a barrier, and these critters would not get into it. And clearly that was proved wrong. And more than anything, the regulatory agencies were just disappointed to hear that this wouldn't be a viable option, because they had really been thinking this will be great. People won't have to use treated lumber or other materials. We can go with something natural. And apparently does not seem very likely as the way forward. It's difficult to explain this in total detail during this, but I was hoping to meet with the Baylands ad hoc and walk through more details of this. But I just wanted to kind of explain briefly what we're talking about. In this left graphic, you can see a 4x4 post in the center, and part of it's been sort of rotted away or eaten away. So there would be a spacer that gives a little gap around the damaged piling. And then this, what's called FRP sheet, which is fiberglass reinforced plastic sheet that goes around it, essentially creating a cone. And then you put a grout down in there, and it both fills the void in the 4x4 and creates a barrier so insects cannot get into the the piling. And on the right, you've got a graphic of the boardwalk itself, and that green sleeve that you see around the piling is kind of what this might look like if the regulatory agencies get behind and support it. So it was a very preliminary conversation. It was really about them laying out the pathway forward to get the necessary permits. So the immediate next steps was to have he said, set up Corps of Engineers says. And that concludes the department report.
Thank you. Do you have any questions for Darren? Commissioner Cribbs?
Oh, thank you. Sure you don't? Okay. So I was wondering, the budget was passed, and I wonder if you could give us a snapshot of how that is going to affect community services, specifically park and recreation.
Yeah, it's summarize it, other than to say, I think it's very positive for our department all the way around. You might recall we had received funding for our park ranger. So we traditionally only had 7. We got an additional park ranger a year ago, but that was a limited funding position. It was only going to be 2 years. This funding process has secured that for the ongoing future. So that will be a permanent one. That was one of the bigger ones that sort of hit home for Mike and I and our team, because we were in limbo, not knowing if this person would be there a year from now. The capital projects, everything we had submitted got approved. So that is all on course for what we had talked about as a commission and what we've been planning on for quite some time. And in general, just a very rewarding process in terms of seeing services restored that were once sort of in peril from our budget deficit having to do with the pandemic.
Thank you very
Sure.
much. Yeah, that's great. I do have one more question about the skate park and the traffic study. Do you have any idea how long it's going to take once it gets scoped and all of that?
Yeah, I think it'll be relatively quick. So we had talked a little bit earlier, there was some feedback. What do you anticipate? Is this one where there are going to be multiple seasons and multiple years? No, I don't think so. I think it's going to be far more brief. They'll use surveys. And now it's really figuring out how many surveys and then data that the city can compile and share with them in terms of, here's all our scheduled use, here's what staff has observed, and they'll add to that. And the additional pieces will probably come from other neighboring agencies with skate parks to kind of get some ideas, but it wouldn't be multiple seasons of looking at it. I think it'll be far more quick than that.
Good. And so is Sam having to wait to be able to raise money until the traffic study comes back?
Well, he could move forward. I think it's wise to wait just so we know. I think it'd be helpful. But as you know, we've already got some money came in. There was the generous donation from the Friends of Palo Alto Parks, for example. But before we do a huge push, it'd be really helpful, I think, to know, are we okay with parking? Yeah, and I don't think it'll be very long. I think we can move that along quickly.
Commissioner Oche?
Thank you. And that's the first time someone is pronouncing my last name very well. So thank you, Vice Chair. Thank you for the reports. I have questions just out of curiosity. So bear with me if I'm asking very minor questions. You talked about some positions still recurrently, vacant. Is there a reason why we're not getting them filled?
Yeah, I think a couple reasons. One, we didn't get very many applicants the first go around. This is the division manager one that I'm referencing. And then the other big reason I think is we just have a really impacted human resources department right now with not enough staff and far too many recruitments ongoing. So some of them are just been sort of slow to move forward. Those two open space ones I mentioned have been rather slow to get the notice out and start recruiting. Whereas the other one, the division manager, has been posted. We got a small number of applicants and we opened it back up to get more.
I see. My second question is for the programs, the summer programs. The report says it's going well. I don't know what that means. And I'm just curious because of, the new ad hoc that we're assigned to work on. What does going well mean?
Yeah.
I know that we're going to be meeting with Kayla, Commissioner Way and I hopefully meet with her to discuss, how many people are on the wait list, and do a more deep dive and all of that.
Yeah.
But I'm just curious to know.
Yeah, forgive the ambiguous doing well is my doing, only because I didn't get a reply from the rec staff when I said, hey, can you let me know how summer camps are going?
Okay.
I just got a basic thumbs up that in general, the classes that are being led are being appreciated by the participants, that kind of thing. So I didn't get any fresh numbers. The last June update, I had shared with you a wait list estimate and some of the programs we've got, but I was hoping to get some fresh information, but I didn't get it this round. So I think probably the conversation with Kayla and the rest of the rec team that you'd have as an ad hoc would be the best way to delve deep into that.
Okay, one last question. Bear with me. I'm curious to know where the old removal for the infill would go. Where are we taking it to?
It's discarded in the trash.
I see.
Yeah.
Okay.
Again, 95% of it was already removed. So now we're just at the 5% that keeps working its way up to the top.
Oh, I see. Okay. Thank you.
Great. Commissioner Freeman?
Yeah, thanks, Darren, for the report. Speaking of in the infill, I think there were two fields that were affected by that, right? Are both fields experiencing the same issue?
So there's two fields at Mayfield, and
Right.
both of them are. But I think you're talking about El Camino, which
Yeah,
had it a couple
exactly.
years earlier, and it had the same exact problem. We removed as much as we could of the old stuff, put in the new infill, and the same process happened. The old material rose to the top, was solarized and heated up, turned gummy, and got stuck on players' shoes or cleats. That eventually sort of resolved. I'm assuming we just sort of exhausted the supply of the old, and now it's pretty minimal. Every once in a while, you'll see crossover players that have played at one field bring it to the other.
Right.
But as you walk the field, you can tell, and our staff is getting in there and digging around and examining. You can even find infill from Mayfield in Gilroy on fields where players are traveling, unfortunately. So yeah, it sticks to people's cleats and moves around quite a bit.
Okay, so it's not as bad as it was in the beginning before we.
Not right now. It's not as
Okay.
bad. Yeah.
And are you receiving any complaints or people have sort of know that the staff's working on it?
I believe so. I haven't
Okay.
heard any complaints yet.
Okay.
I'm guessing this hot spell coming may change things, but we'll see. We're trying our best to just communicate and get ahead and let people know we're doing our best.
Okay. And one last question on the coyote attacks. Are those happening at pretty much in the same location, or is it sporadic? I mean, you think it's the same animal or multiple animals?
It's a good question, and I want to be real careful. If I use the word attack, please forgive
Okay,
me.
I mean
Yeah,
aggressive.
just
animal.
aggressive behavior,
Right,
which
right.
is very different from an attack. And so just aggressive
Yeah.
behavior, which means not going away when it should, or maybe
Right.
following. That's the kind of thing we're talking about. Some growling perhaps, but no bites, nothing
Right,
like
okay.
that. And in the past, when it was so localized to one trail, staff felt confident that it was one coyote. But given these multiple sites, it's possible it could be one or it could be more. We don't
Got
know
it.
for sure.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Flyhouse?
Thank you. Can you give us an update on the issue of the golf course mitigation and reporting.
Yeah, thanks, Commissioner Kleinhaus. I believe Lomdo sent Commissioner Freeman an update on that. It's fairly brief that we're still working on it, but that'll come at the OTAC report. And if there's anything I can supplement when you give that, I'm glad to try. Is that fair?
Great. Any other questions for Darren? Comments?
Sorry, one more question. So back to the coyotes, that's only at the Rastradero, not at Foothills?
Correct.
I'm curious to know how we can help actually addressing earlier outreach about recruitment. Is there any link we can circulate to people?
Yeah, it's on. I'm glad to email it out to the commission. It's on our HR webpage, and I'm glad to send that.
Okay, thanks.
Great. Thank you. Great report, Darren.
Thank you.
All right, moving on to business. First, we have Palo Alto Recreation Foundation and Friends of Palo Alto Parks update, and I don't know who we're beginning with.
Yeah, let me. So much for being here.
To be young after something like that's under your belt. But I think the world has really changed significantly. So initially, the city had no money when we started in the 70s. If we were going to have recreation, we had to find the funding. We had to, in lots of cases, we had to volunteer to make the activities happen. Over the last few years, we have not had a major city fundraising event, and largely because that just doesn't seem to be the style of things. You don't have a, like a festival down California Avenue. California Avenue is available practically 24 hours for the communities. So there's not one kind of activity. And I don't think families look to supporting activities to ensure recreation. We look to the city to do that. I mean, we've changed, I think, a lot. The community has changed a lot. So hate to put everything on staff, but that's more or less where we're at. I think things like Mitchell Park are, and we have to look at how I think that one of the future issues is going to be who controls Mitchell Park and South, because that is where the community goes for much of its activities. And if we sites, we lose a huge part. I may be wrong, but California Avenue, as I said, it's fully closed now, and it's starting at 6 o'clock a night. It goes on, but it's not recreation anymore. It's community interaction. So what am I concerned about as I sort of age my way out of the kinds of things that I've done with the Recreation Foundation for a long time? I just don't think we can, the Recreation Foundation, or any subsequent activity, can raise money for program. that we look to the city, and we're going to be grateful to take part in whatever you do. And my perception is that is where people think under 17, under 19, people find activities that engage them. So what am I suggesting? We at the Rec Foundation sort of are kind of in a holding pattern, in my opinion. I don't know that if you replace me, which I'd be happy to at some point to sort of contribute the search for replacement people. Then they trust sort of stuff that we do on like, and I think that we just simply have to accept that. I don't see, I mean, we have some small resources left from a number of our past activities, and we are able to give city staff dollars, $2,500 or $5 as long as those money last, but it's not a major thing. It's to cover something that isn't covered in the budget and can't be into the budget till next year. And I think communities, families look to swimming, running, whatever, to be on a city site and to be sort of overseen by the city just as a comfort factor. So I guess in some ways what I've been thinking over the last couple of days, what is it that the Rec Foundation would still do? And I think will help staff meet unexpected things as long as the dollars that we have last. But I don't envision us being in a position to raise significantly more monies. Like at one time we might raise $100,000 to $150,000 and it would fund a good part of the recreation department's budget. But to me, that's just no longer a realistic way. And besides 150 that 10 years ago did something significant is sort of modest by current standards. So I just basically, and I haven't talked this over with the board in great detail, but I think from the way we have behaved this last year, we don't expect to be to have a significant role in recreation activities, funding recreation activities. We're hopeful that the community at large appreciates that if it's done through the city, there will be a cost, and the cost will be borne by all of us as members of the community. So I think an era is over and we now have a new era in which what will basically serve the community are activities that I think are either at the Baylands or activities that are at Mitchell Park. I mean, those to me are the two biggest centers where we do lots of stuff for lots of people. But who does it? The city does it, not a private foundation. So maybe I'm just admitting that myself and a couple of other long-term members of the Rec Foundation, but I just don't see major fundraising activities ahead of private groups. I think that the community expects that traditionally, we have been a very supportive of activities for families, and we expect that to come from the city itself. So I'll stop there and I'll take any questions if you want, but I've been thinking about this for the last 2 or 3 days. Well, when Anne mentioned that we would be in a position to make a presentation to the city Recreation Foundation board, I mean, sort of the board itself. And then I wondered, what is it we're going to say? And the answer is, I think an era is past, and now we need to support staff and city in the that kids come to activities that are structured and are generally on city at city sites. So I'm going to stop there because otherwise I'm just going to be reproducing the thought that the likes of the Rec Foundation are here. We can do small things, but we depend on the city to provide the services that we, the community, want for our families. So, okay. And I'll take questions if anybody has any, but I think I've just surrendered to the inevitable costs of future. I mean, I don't, okay, just leave it at that.
Thank you, Jack. Do you want to go to questions on this presentation before? Yep. Okay, great. Let's begin with our liaison to the funding partners with Commissioner Cribbs first. Give you the opportunity.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And Jack, thank you very much for your service to the Recreation Foundations. It's been a long time, 1985, and you have provided great, wonderful leadership for you, the Recreation Foundation, and the board. And certainly were many of us familiar with the Black and White Ball and the programs that the Recreation Foundation has both created and monitored and supported. And we've all heard Adam come and talk about the amounts of money that are supporting programs right now. So I'm not so sure it's as dire as you think it is, but maybe you just have a little bit different perspective. But I think when the chair had suggested that we talk about or hear about the Recreation Foundation and also the Friends of the Palo Alto Parks, it seems like since we have new commissioners and since new things happen, it might be interesting to hear sort of how you were organized and what you've done over the years. And I would just like to add that the Recreation Foundation, like the Friends of the Park, is a 501c3 or a 501c, whatever the number is for you all. Yeah. And it's a great way for the community to support programs that they care about and programs that they'd like to see in order to support staff and the wonderful things that the city does. So I would let my colleagues ask specific questions, but I would just like to commend you and the board of the Recreation Foundation for everything that you've done over the years and that I know you'll continue to do. So thank you very much.
Great. Other questions?
Sure. Thank you. Hey, Jack, thank you. And nice to see you again. Excellent presentation. And like Ed said, thank you for all the years of service that you've provided to the city. It's definitely appreciated. I guess one question I would ask, you mentioned that you thought that, funding has changed somewhat, I guess, from the way it was 15, 20 years ago. Why do you think that is? I mean, there's more, I think there's more people out there with money that they're willing to fund projects. Are you saying maybe it's just a little bit more difficult, or maybe people don't know the avenue in which to give, or maybe we shouldn't even just depend on that?
I think there's the community itself doesn't recreate the way it used to. It's much more concerned about the site and is the site available for what age groups. I think also that what was significant dollars at one time is a fraction of what the recreation budget for the city is. And also, I just don't see that the community sort of would support something like a black and white ball. I think that those things were, we as adults, and I look at my son and my grandkids and what they would do, what they want to be able to do is run in the, out on the baylands, or they want to swim in a city pool. They want the site to be safe. And those things, I think, are all what we now look to the city for, because we have had a couple of years of balanced budgets in the city and in the state. That doesn't mean it won't change in the future, but we now take that if the community can afford the activity, I think most of those who participate in, for example, Mitchell Park, they think that that should be available to them as a member of the community. And I happen to agree. So that we should be in a position where we are able to fund however we do it, because raising $100,000 a year, which used to, we used to do a lot with that, unfortunately is not much now. It just doesn't do a lot.
And Vice Chair, I was just going to suggest that if we want to, after this round of questions is done, go to the public for any comments on questions.
Any other questions? All right, let's go to the public. Any public comment? Please raise your hand.
I'm seeing no hands raised.
Great, thank you. I have a couple comments, Jack, if you don't mind. First of all, just thanking you for everything that you've done as someone who grew up in Palo Alto Parks. I'm sure your fingerprints were on everything that I enjoyed as a kid. And I think you made a lot of good points about
His fingers are on
yeah,
this
that's
now.
true. That's true. Everybody's. I think there's always a need for fundraising in the community, and you've done so much to build up a great framework for a vessel to sort of channel funds and raise community awareness as well as funds, which I think is another strength of yours. And I think the pendulum swings one way, but it tends to swing back. So it's important to keep that infrastructure and that legacy alive in whatever form that is. If it's playing a big role or playing a small role, maybe it grows back up again. But I do think that it's important to continue to highlight it here, continue to work with the commission and maybe look at what that role is. I know that the community has changed, but Darren's got a fresh list of new things on his desk that he's got to get done. And so how could you help support that? Maybe it's something in helping, you talked about people being able to afford programs, maybe making sure that any inequities are addressed. I think that's a great effort to fundraise for. And I think a lot of people in the community would find that appealing. And I, again, just want to reiterate my thanks. And I do think all these small things add up. And I always like the saying, if you don't think the small things matter, you never spent a night with a mosquito. Not that you're a mosquito, but I think that you can have a big impact with even a slightly different role. So I just wanted to say thank you.
One of the things that we have not succeeded in doing yet, but we're sort of slowly taking steps for us, Palo Alto doesn't have its own basically community pool. We don't have, I mean, we've used the pools from the school districts, but we don't have, and we have an area, you know, near 101 that would be ideal for that. But that's if you to require construction, and we're going to need bigger money for that kind of activity if we're going to succeed in adding new, what'll I say, new face to some of the things that we have traditionally expected of our community.
Any other questions or comments from commissioners? Commissioner White?
Yeah, I wonder it's relevant because I'm quite new on the commission. So I was having a conversation today with somebody who want to do 50 years anniversary for the creation of the internet, which she believes Palo Alto plays a big role. There's a plaque apparently in Crown Plaza. So she's last year, 49th anniversary, apparently it was held in Mitchell Park. And this year she wanted to do the same, but create something like the Pebble Road for the future. So like it's like a brick. Yeah, so people can donate to that. And I wonder that will be an annual event compared to black and white ball, whether they would generate more interest, because you could look into who's played a role creating internet in this city. And in the future, how would that look like? I can make introduction for you to start a conversation with the person who leads.
I'm happy to have those conversations. And I think there are people that would contribute to major projects like upgrading stuff. I mean, Mitchell Park eventually will have huge costs as far as its physical plant. And those we do, I think, but program support, I think, isn't near as effective to do just with relatively smaller contributions. That's more or less my point.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Thank you for your service again.
Vice Chair, just to kind of summarize, Jack, thank you so much for coming and talking and all that you have done. And as I said earlier, I don't think that this is as dire as you think it is. I think that the community, as the Vice Chair says, does need a vehicle to fundraise for small and for big projects. And I think you all provide that vehicle, as do the Friends of the Parks. And we're really, really fortunate in Palo Alto to have two groups with 501c3s, with interested people and boards of directors who have feel willing to volunteer their time. So could you just extend our thanks to all of them? And
I will.
I don't see the
yes.
Recreation Foundation going away in the near future. So just don't
Okay.
think it's
All
going
right.
to.
Okay. I just
Thank you.
Thank you. thank you very much for listening to my babbling and fretting. It's more or less fretting. How do we manage to evolve so that we can do more than we've done in the past? That's basically what it is. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
And glad to introduce Richard Hackman, the Director of the Friends of Palo Alto Parks. Richard, thank you for being here.
Happy to be here. Can you all hear me okay?
Yes.
Great. Sorry I couldn't be there in person, but was happy to be invited and speak on behalf of the board. So once again, my name's Richard Heckman. I'm here representing the Friends of the Palo Alto Parks to share information with you all in the community about who we are and what we do. So just quickly for the folks who don't know, Friends of the Palo Alto Parks is a incorporated 501c3 that was founded in December of 2003. So this December will be our 20th anniversary. And over the years, Friends of the Palo Alto Parks has been involved with a number of different projects some of you all may know about, including the Magical Bridge project, Lytton Plaza, and Heritage Park, among others. The Palo Alto Parks has been able to serve over the years is rather than leading all of the projects ourselves and fundraising for all of the projects ourselves, we've almost exclusively used a partnership model where we have a group who's focused on a certain objective or initiative and has a specific project and project scope in mind and is interested in doing the fundraising work, but doesn't have all of the infrastructure set up that you need to take donations in a tax-free manner and do the associated accounting work, et cetera. So one of the things we really want the community to know is that we are a partner who can serve as an entity that has the infrastructure to make tax-deductible donations, and we can partner with groups who have specific projects in mind. That's the model we've used historically, and it's the one we plan to continue to use. So for folks who look to us and say, what do you do? We haven't seen you do, this project or that project. Well, if that's a project folks want to see, please come to us, talk to us. Let's start a conversation about what could be done. And we could play a role in that specifically on the financial side. And I don't think a lot of people necessarily know that it takes a lot of work to set up a 501c3. There's costs associated with it and maintaining it. And so by having all of that infrastructure in place to support initiatives with parks, we feel like we can serve a good role within the sort of fundraising ecosystem, if you will, to make things greener and better here in the community. So I'll leave it at that. I'm happy to answer questions and talk more about specific things of interest to you all. But I think the key point I'd like to get through tonight is that the Friends of the Palo Alto Parks is there to provide the nonprofit community with a place to receive funds for specific projects that folks are interested in. And we look forward to opportunities to partner with groups who have ideas in mind.
Great. Thank you, Richard. I'll begin again with our funding partners liaison, Commissioner Cribs.
Thank you, Richard. Thank you very much for being here tonight. We appreciate it. And thank you. Actually, congratulations on your almost 20th anniversary. I had no idea you had been around that long. So that's my bad. At any rate, I'm very familiar with the work that you do. And I wanted to make sure that all of the commissioners have been to the great website and seen the different buckets that range from gardens to all sorts of different kinds of opportunities. And I appreciate your board very much and your willingness to take on new projects and be very definite about the parameters. So I'll stop right here. But again, it's a wonderful resource to have in Palo Alto. Everybody loves their parks and certainly loves it that you all are standing in support of them. And I'm sure that Darren has some really good words to say as well. So thank you.
Great. Other questions? Commissioner Kleinhaus?
When groups, thank you for your work. When groups want to do a project and they have volunteers involved, who covers the insurance for the volunteers?
It's a great question. So if I this is just off the top of my head, historically, insurance has kind of varied due to the project. So if the project involves relatively heavy construction, then oftentimes insurance would be covered by the contractor associated with doing the work and the subs. If it's a smaller project, then sometimes the insurance is covered by the organization doing the work. It really varies, project by project. Normally, we don't have a specific role in insurance the way that we do in receiving donations and supporting with the associated payment of invoices related to specific projects.
Thank you.
Commissioner Freeman?
I'm sorry.
Or sorry.
Good.
Thank you, Richard, for the presentation and basically for the good job of getting me familiar with the work that you guys do, and we really appreciate it. And definitely, I've worked there. One question I have though is do you guys, you're more, would you say you're more like a sponsor? And at what point in time, I guess, is there a handoff to as the project develops?
Sure. So it's a great question. I think the best way to think about the Friends of the Palo Alto Parks is a partner in these initiatives. So a partner who can help with, as I mentioned, receive the 501c3 component, receiving the donations and paying invoices, but also folks who have a little bit of experience with projects who can provide maybe some insights and recommendation, and also potentially, use our network and contacts to reach out to appropriate folks who might be right for a specific initiative. One example I like to give about the work we've done that I think worked really well was Lytton Plaza. This slightly predated when I joined the board, but I was coming to town right as it was finishing up. But that was a great example in the sense of there was a board of directors who was specific to the project. Then there was the Friends of the Palo Alto Parks who had the 501c3 and could take the donations. And then the city of Palo Alto was also a partner because they had the land. And all three groups were able to work together to come up with, a vision for a reimagined plaza, and each serve their role to make it happen. And it did. And I think it turned out well. So, I think a partner is really the best way almost always to think of us. And just for folks who'd like to read a little bit more about who we are and what we do, I have placed our website URL in the chat, in the Zoom chat. And if staff would like, they can add that to the minutes.
Great, we'll have them do that. Commissioner Wei?
Hi, Richard. It's nice to meet you here, and thanks for the great work. So I want to ask a question because Commissioner Oche and I are looking to expanding classes for the Enjoy catalog. So if we take the parks as an open classroom, so if you would be able to have children take regular classes, is there a process we need to work with you? And don't know how that works in terms of to put regular classes in the parks. Hypothetically, say photography class or karate class. You have put ping pong table on the Lytton Plaza, maybe more in other parks, and try to understand the process, how that works.
Sure. So is your question about does Friends of the Palo Alto Parks help with capital improvements such as ping pong tables, or the
and also the program, both. Yeah.
Okay. So okay, so that's a good question. So normally programming is handled by staff. So any programs, activities, set schedules, use of parks during set times, normally that's handled by staff through their process. When it comes to capital, efforts, obviously for the initiatives that we're a part of, we're involved on the capital side. And for example, Lytton Plaza, we both during the design process and the ongoing, maintenance process have made capital contributions for that park. But for capital contributions that are outside of the major initiatives that we've worked on, we tend to be relatively selective on those and pick ones that make sense, but not all of them, because a lot of them are natural fits for the city's capital budget, right? But others might pop up, and there might, we can sometimes fill a gap. For example, we were approached a number of years back about someone who wanted to get free Wi-Fi installed at a park. So we partnered with them and helped them raise the money to get this Wi-Fi node installed. So it was a one-time pop-up thing. I think that's where in general we can be most helpful, with something clear and specific that folks are looking to do, especially if it's related to a project we've already worked on.
Thank you. That's very helpful.
Great. Do we have any questions from the public or public comments?
I'm not seeing any hands raised, Vice Chair.
Great. Any other questions from the commission? Appreciate your presentation, and we'll make sure to keep the website on, I think it's on our commission website as well, but keep passing the message forward.
Great. Thank you all so much.
Thank you.
All right, next we have the Safe Routes to Schools update.
Thank you, Vice Chair. And it's my pleasure to introduce Jose Palma. He's the Safe Routes to School Coordinator with the Office of Transportation. Thank you for being here, Jose.
Not a problem. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay. If you can set up the presentation, and then I can get going. Or do you want me to screen share?
I got it up right here.
Thank you so much. Just a second. I'm going to try to arrange here. Okay. All right. Hello, everybody. My name's Jose. I've been with the Safe Routes to School team for about 3.5 years, and I'll get right into it. So if we can get into the next slide, that'd be great. Here. All right. So today I'll share an overview of the last completed school year of 2021-2022. I will discuss our post-pandemic response to parents and some PAUSD restrictions related to the pandemic, education adjustments due to the pandemic, information about the new community outreach tool, and an overview of outcomes and data trends. Next slide. The Safe Routes to School mission and goal listed here help to reduce the risk of students en route to and from school and encourage more families to choose healthy, active, sustainable alternatives to driving solo by following the Safe Routes to School ease model for safe, active, healthy, and sustainable school commutes. The work grows out of widely held community values codified in the Comprehensive Plan, Sustainability Plan, and the Bike and Pedestrian Plan. And it allows for Palo Alto families to invest in different kinds of bikes and have mobility for school or other trips without using a car. As active school commuters are a concern of Palo Alto residents, the Safe Routes to School Partnership's goals is to increase community awareness of the many resources, educational programs, and encouragement opportunities available to address transportation safety. Next slide. Next slide. Sorry. Oh, thanks. All right. At the start of the new school year, the return of in-person teaching brought many challenges for everyone, including the Safe Routes to School program. Reopening school was fraught with fear and uncertainty, but Safe Routes to School program was determined to find ways to adapt to ensure education could continue virtually and in person. Due to the pandemic, PAUSD had to limit campus access points to reduce cohort mixing and COVID exposure. Doing so changed how families planned their routes to and from school. In addition, since we were still learning the nature of the coronavirus, it appears that some of the parents believed that driving their children in a vehicle was a way to reduce exposure to corona. At the same time, parents, families, and others who chose to walk or bike to school were noticing more parents driving. Additionally, due to the limited campus access point, many students were unable to store their bikes conveniently, as bike racks were no longer at every campus access point. Due to the change, we received a large amount of back to school and bike pedestrian safety requests that showed people were paying attention and valuing transportation safety and education. As a result, the Safe Routes to School staff and PAUSD staff conducted walk and bike audits during the reopening period to ensure that biking, walking to and from campus were improved. The pandemic also impacted a core component of the Safe Routes to School partnership, our volunteers. With high level of parents' fear of exposure to the virus and PUSC regulations limiting campus visitors, the Safe Routes to School staff moved bike rodeo education to spring of 2022. In light of that change, the Safe Routes to School program delivered 6th grade education in fall through online courses, kindergarten and 1st grade pedestrian lessons via Zoom in the spring. Next slide. Although fall reopening was challenging, we found that PUSC parents were noticing value and impact of in-school training and education. After announcing the spring bike rodeos, the Safe Routes to School team was in high pedal gear, preparing for the new wave of volunteers that were nervous yet eager to bring back their cherished tradition. Laws and programming gave the Safe Routes School staff a chance to debut a new rodeo scheduling software that makes rodeo scheduling easier for everyone. Additionally, we also increased community outreach using e-bike, which I will explain more in the next slide. Lastly, we provided kindergarten, 1st grade, 5th grade, and a portion of 3rd grade pre-rodeo education online. Next slide. The Safe Routes to School team expanded community engagement through physically distant safety education pilots supported by VTA. Whimsically named Mike, the mobility information kiosk e-bike provided outdoor COVID-safe education and encouragement resources directly in the community at public parks and schools. This project showed residents that staff were using the cargo bike for official business, effectively demonstrating bicycling could be used for more than just recreation. The best place for Mike to meet some of the people turned out to be Mitchell Park Community Center and the bike repair events at schools. We had an interesting note where we had somebody coming up to me, her name was Ashley, and we had an exchange where she was very interested in the walk and roll maps. And through that interaction, she decided to create a board game with her son that was then later showcased at Hoover Elementary. So one of the examples of communicating with residents when we would do this pilot. Next slide. Okay. Great, thanks. The partnership has also implemented several programs to support families from historically underrepresented and economically adverse communities. We partner with Bay Area Outreach and Recreation Program on adaptive bicycling pilots for 22 secondary exceptional needs students and their parents. Shown in the photo on the left is a parent and her son on adaptive bicycle. We coordinated a similar event for elementary students the year before. Additionally, we hosted 5 bike repair events in collaboration with campuses PTA at Green, JLS, Fletcher, Pali, Gunn, and Escondido. We distributed approximately 75 helmets donated by the Santa Clara Public Health Department. We also had a Black History Month celebration ride that was organized by Escondido and El Carmelo Transportation Safety Representatives, or TSRs, that honor historical achievements of Black Palo Altans and East Palo Altans. All right, next slide. Each year, the partnership reviews the 5-year plan to ensure that it remains responsive to community needs. In 2021-2022, we were able to complete 2 new strategies that brought us to 86 completion of the year 4 objectives. We conducted site assessments for Gunn High School, Briones Elementary, and reviewed the transportation concept plan and community engagement strategy with City School Transportation Safety Committee. Next slide. Hopefully you can see this. As you can see, the change in pedestrian bike numbers appears mixed with an overall flat trend in walking and biking on average. However, driving appears to be increasing district-wide. If we look at historical trends, elementary school parents in 2021 were driving at essentially the same rate as 2016, erasing the progress we've made since the peak of 2019. Most concerning, driving numbers in the middle school were higher than 2021, 2016. Next slide. For the 2021-2022 year, the high school bike count numbers were 45% at Gunn, 42 at Pali. Due to the lockdown in 2020, we don't have the data for that year. Next slide. For 2021, 2022, middle school bike count numbers were 61% at Green and 53 at JLS and 40% at Fletcher. Next slide. All right. This is preliminary data that was collected in fall 2022 that we are sharing with you because the trends are concerning. Statistics for driving are higher than in 2021 district-wide. Note that pedestrian bike district-wide range is negative at 2% compared to no change in 2021. A bright spot is that high school active transportation proportion did not change, but normally we see an increase in this population. City staff suspects that the following factors are contributing to driving. They include 1, the lack of city school shuttle service and reduced PUSD busing, driving habits developed during the pandemic, campus access points limited due to security concerns, 4, disruption of the normal Safe Routes to School education schedule, and 5, reduce PTA volunteer capacity for secondary school programming. City staff is looking forward to working with the partnership to address these factors in order to reduce driving. Next slide. At the end of the 2021-22 school year, the Safe Routes to School team piloted a zero waste rodeo model, or bike rodeo, if nobody's familiar with bike rodeo, upgraded bike rodeo course maps, and supported PTA parent volunteer recruitment, as you can see from our image that we took at a transportation safety representative gathering. And that's it.
Great, thank you very much. Let's begin with clarifying questions on the presentation, and then we'll go to public comment and then any other comments from the commission. Any clarifying questions? Okay, do we have any public comment?
I'm seeing no hands raised, Vice Chair.
Great, thank you. All right, back to the commission for discussion. We're missing our Safe Routes liaison, Chair Greenfield. So anybody that has a question? Commissioner Kleinhaus?
Yeah, your mic event, I was wondering if part of the education includes the areas in Palo Alto or explanation about where e-bikes are encouraged and where they're not permitted.
When we conducted the MIC project, this was before, I believe, some of the changes that were done for where e-bikes can be ridden happened. So most of the time I focused on, for example, providing a walk and roll map and walking through families on how to get to a specific school. But in order to note your question, currently we do have on our website information resources. It's called it's just e-biking. Let me see if I can provide that for you guys here, but it's we named it here. It was actually done by Marin County, but we think it's well received, so I will add that there. But it just talks about, so parents, what they should know about electric bikes. It's something that I wish I had when I was talking to parents, if they had any more information about electric bikes, but mostly the conversations that I had were related to how to get to and from school at the time, because kids were returning full time and there had been a lack of education. So I was helping them, as I said, through the walk and roll map on how to get to and from school.
So it would be helpful if in future events you have a map that shows where potentially they shouldn't be riding electric bikes and encouraging them. I mean, they're allowed in all the city parks, right? And encouraged to be used to get to school, and that's good. I'm just thinking that it would be good to also, since you're educating people about and encouraging them to use e-bikes, to also explain here is in Palo Alto areas that we don't use them.
Absolutely.
And then I have another question. It is from a sustainability point of view, discouraging to see that there's more people driving. But I was wondering if you see any change in incidents, like accidents or anything associated with that.
With,
If you see more people drive, do we also see more safety issues? Like, incidents?
I think nationally, there has been conversation about the increase of, I would say, driving, especially during the pandemic. So I would say that, I don't speak for PAPD, but I'm assuming they would have that information. We usually are in communication with them, but I do not know at the top of my head if there are increases or decreases, but I can definitely check with them and get back to you and discuss that with my team and further connect with PAPD if that is what you wish.
It's a program for safe ways to school. So I'm just wondering, how safe it is. So that's why I asked. And
well, these
what the Palo Alto police has would be good to connect it to, and in the same line, electric bicycles are wonderful in some ways, but also there've been quite a lot of studies that show that there are accidents that occur often and are more severe than otherwise. And I was wondering also, and I guess the answer is probably the same, if we see any of that in Palo Alto.
I was trying to respond to the other question where, goodness, I just forgot, but I'll see if I get back to that one. But we are providing, so regarding that slide or the PDF that I shared with you guys on the website, this is just our team is sharing with this through our e-news and through our transportation safety representatives to share this information, as they are a conduit to connect to the various schools, the school community, to educate on using an e-bike. We know that it's increasing in popularity, but we continue to we're tracking e-bike usage via our student travel tallies, and are still looking for the best practices nationwide. So this is why it's still in its infancy, and we're just really trying hard to understand the situation, but also we're trying to provide as many educational resources as possible, but we do not have those numbers that you are discussing or asking.
Thank you. Commissioner Oche?
Thank you again for pronouncing my last name well. Thank you very much, Jose. I appreciate you sharing Ashley's working board game with us, like the map. I think that's very cool. And also sharing, the trends, the data with us. I'm just curious to know how you track. And also in lieu of the upcoming school year, do you have like any classes or training for residents or the community, in terms of encouraging them to consider biking classes? Do we have anything that, students should, look out for during this summer? Also, since it's an update, I was hoping maybe you could share like lessons learned from the past year, and then maybe have you done like surveys or feedback, from the community to know, maybe ideas or tips for improvement and things like that? So
I'll try to, there's a lot there, so I'll try. There's one thing I remembered from the previous questions asked. As a reminder, these maps are suggested safe routes maps. They are not safe routes maps. So these are just suggested routes for families to consider and to take. And then going back to that, the board question, and I'm trying to remember a couple of things there, but first, we do have classes being taught this summer through Wheel Kids that teach middle school students about bike safety and to prepare them for middle school. And that was done after the 5th grade refresher that was done on campus. And parents were provided with a letter that informed them about the Wheel Kids program and to help or to encourage parents to sign up for that. And then I kind of missed the first one where Ashley, you were asking about Ashley. Forgive me.
No, just acknowledging the fact that it was a cool idea that Ashley did, like the board
yes.
game. So just commending.
Oh, and then how tracking, right? So
yes, how do you track?
Yeah, so we were I would track this portionally. I would track this as like a high or low interaction. So high interactions were lengthy comments or conversation wise. So, you know, it wouldn't be like a low conversation. I would code that as a 1. If somebody's like, oh, what is this? And I'm like, oh, this is a Safe Routes to School program. They're like, okay, that's great. And then, you know, they don't really engage further with me. But if it was a high interaction, it means that we're discussing, they're like, oh, can I know more about this program? I'm like, absolutely. And they're like, oh, are those walk and roll maps? I'm like, yes. And just have this exchange. So we would track not only high and low interactions, but how many flyers did we give out? I would also give demonstrations on how to, you know, signal when you're riding your bike, or how to wear your helmet properly and securely, and also how do bike lights work. And even at one point, I also taught somebody, because I was next to Mitchell Park, there are bike racks there. I showed them how to properly lock their bike with a U-lock on an inverted U bike rack. So it definitely, you know, it was beyond just tracking the numbers, but there were some things there, like I'm expressing or explaining to you today, was further, I would say, an importance of not just giving flyers out, but also the interactions that we have. And that interaction, I think, played a big part into probably during the pandemic, where people were inundated with Zoom conversations or click on this link, check this PowerPoint. I think people were also yearning for conversations with people in person. So it definitely played an importance on that interaction. And again, please forgive me. I think I've answered 2 of your 4 questions, but where were the other 2?
Actually, I have a 5th one.
Okay.
So the questions were, I wanted to know how you shared the trend and the data with us. So I wanted to know how you got the data, the metrics. That was what I was asking. And also the training, which you already said, you know, information went out to 5th graders, right? After the refresher course.
Mm-hmm.
And you said it's a summer camp, right? Or summer class.
Mm-hmm.
To teach people. I also asked about lessons learned, since it's an update. And then did you do surveys in the past? Did you get feedback, tips on improvements, you know, just input from the community on how to get better? And then my 5th question is, do we have any partnerships with companies who want to maybe rent bikes or, you know, give bikes and things like that? Help to repair bikes, you know, just opportunities for residents. And how are we planning to create that awareness to the
Yes. So that last one, I think we are working with the Bike X organization here in, I think it's Palo Alto, and we're working with them, and we work with them, you know, in recent amount of times, at least, sort of like in an equity stance. Working with them to provide used bikes to those who might not have a bike. And that's something that we will discuss further as the 2022-2023 year. But just to let you know that that is definitely being considered and keeping it local as possible. When it comes to lessons learned, definitely, I feel like things have shifted a lot during the pandemic, and, you know, this sort of, you know, I don't like to use that all the time, but like this new normal, or you know, we did do surveys, as we always do, for rodeos, and you know, we gather that information and try to definitely learn from the situation. But as I said, and probably the most important part is understanding that the pandemic definitely impacted, as this partnership is, parents who are super volunteers, who are now either, at the time, were not, there were either concern about their health that they did not want to be involved, and also the lack of not allowing parents on campus. And just, that definitely brought an impact, right, on the education for students and parents about bike safety and bike education, pedestrian safety, because it was happening online, but it wasn't happening in person. So the lesson was here is that in person definitely plays a big part in retaining information, and also sort of that interaction that we have instead of just, turning on the screen and telling people to watch a video. I think definitely the interactions in person play a big role. And I'm sorry to say this again, but there was one more part there that I needed to answer, but I think I did 4 out of 5.
Thank you, Jose.
Oh, okay.
Commissioner Wei?
Oh, hi, Jose. Thanks for the great presentation and the great work done. So just tag on what you were saying during this new normal, where the bike riding is reduced. What's your plan to increase that? And whether, is there anything to do with maybe we can look into more bike share possibility in the city, or the safe routes, where they, can be, the map can be distributed to every school, every classroom, working with the school district and PTA and the principals of the schools.
Well, for example, just the map is super important to have, and it's a great tool that we can provide online and should be on school websites, I believe. It's that we share that. That's the partnership. We work with the TSRs, or the transportation safety reps, and they've been, instrumental in helping this partnership grow. So these maps do play an important part, but it was sort of going back to my mic interaction, sort of, you can have something digital and share that. But I feel like, again, people are kind of very fatigued of just looking at stuff online.
Agreed.
I saw an interaction where multiple times where I was with parents and families, kind of like the mere fact of just writing on a map and looking at things and falling together was very heartwarming to see, because it brings families together. It teaches them about the routes that they are thinking about, and they're asking hard questions to each other, like, how do you feel about going through here? Well, I need more practice. Great. So that sort of interaction, I think, is needed more, especially due to the pandemic. We were not able to kind of really have that because we weren't able to bike out there, and people weren't able to practice. Rodeo was not able to happen. So we're seeing that is now, it's like a catch up, just making sure that everybody gets that education. And then, one of the things, and I wanted to just quickly get this, let me see if I can grab this information. Here we go. So in the past, we were able to support like the PTA lead program in secondary schools, because this is where, I'm not sure if you're aware of this, but the Safe Routes to School has a capacity for elementary school. And because we used to rely on those super parent volunteers, there is not that much of a support, or there's that support that used to support the middle school and high schoolers is not it's not part, we're just focused on elementary. And since the pandemic, that has dwindled, and we are trying to recover there, but we don't have sort of that other support that we need. So what we're trying to do is that the city will conduct a needs and a capacity assessment for a secondary schools to determine what kind of program is needed at the high school, and what kind of support the PTA can provide, and how much additional city resources will be required. So sort of like expanding and continue to reach out to more just beyond the elementary school is of importance of sort of getting the word out there. I'm not sure if that answered your question, but I kind of want to give you an idea of where the city is, or the Safe Routes to School program is going.
When you go to a park, say Foothill Park, they give you a physical map. I loved it because my phone may not work info here, right? Does that exist for your safe route map for every school? If you go to the school, there's a map saying that's how you get to the school from Palato biking lanes.
Many schools, especially the elementary schools, and definitely I've seen them at some of the high schools. It's just they've asked us, for example, to print out large maps for them, and the parents then talk to the office administrators and set up and install maps at the front of the school. And just to further your point, one of the things I kept stressing at people, it's like a map, they're like, oh, that's not environmentally friendly. But I would say to them, well, it might not be, but you could recycle it. But the other thing I would say, it doesn't run on battery, so it won't die on you, and you can store it with you and use it as long as you have it with you. Compared to a phone, right? It might die of power, and you might be lost if you are relying on that map. Just to kind of further your point on having a physical map, but the schools, the TSRs are the ones who usually ask us for updated maps, or if they want a second map, and we usually provide the map and even deliver it by bike if needed.
Fantastic. Thank you.
Commissioner Freeman?
Yes, thank you. Thank you for the presentation and all the information you're providing, as well as what you're doing for the safe route to school. I do have one question. I think Commissioner Ochoa has asked about it, and that was where do you get your data? And the other question is, I note here that I guess 20-year slide for the high school bike counts and some of the others, but specifically that one, like in 2021, it shows like there was a dip both at Gunn and Pally, and I'm just wondering, do you incorporate the other transportation means that the kids are now embracing, like electric scooters and other type of mobility vehicles that you can use like on the bike paths and so forth? Is that incorporated in your analysis, especially for 2021, and it's probably more for 2022 as well?
Yeah, so we're noticing the emergence of more micromobility that is being used. Currently, we kind of just categorize it, we haven't yet, but I know that we are, when we're recording or when we're getting this information, which is through the partnership of PAUSD, who collects that information on behalf of us, we are looking into sort of, I would say, updating, but I have to kind of check back with my team. But we do collect that, sort of like you were asking about the data. That data is collected in partnership between the school district and us, and including some of the parents, especially when we do bike counts at schools, it's collected by the parents. So sort of that interaction at this moment in time, I know we're looking into collecting further information. I couldn't say right now unless you want me to check back with my team, but we are collecting that information. So I think I didn't answer one other question. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I was just trying to see if has also been an increase in some of the other types of conveyances, and if you see that number going up, like people are giving up their bikes and maybe using electric scooters and those types of vehicles.
I think I wouldn't be able to, I don't barely know. I think I keep seeing more bikes. That's personally for me. I ride my bike as a Palo Alto employee. I've kind of believe in model behavior, so I definitely ride my bike as much as possible when I meet people throughout the city if needed. So usually I'm on a bike, but I probably am not seeing as many, at least on my end, personally.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Great. Any other questions? Commissioner Oche?
It's me again, Jose.
Hi.
During your presentation, you kept talking about parent volunteers. So what do they do, and then how do you engage them?
Absolutely. So parents are, I would say, a glue because they definitely keep this partnership together between the PTA PUSD and the school. It was parents who brought a lot of the concerns to the school district that also brought it to the city to make this partnership happen. And you can learn more about our partnership through the website, where it talks about the partnership and the history of the Safe Routes to School program. If you'd like to know more detail, I can definitely put that on there. But we do have the City School Transportation Safety Committee, which does include transportation safety representatives, which are parent volunteers from all schools in the PUSD district, which they have 1 to 2 representatives on a volunteer basis. And they meet with us during school months to discuss transportation safety related issues in their school or surrounding area. And we try to connect them during that sort of interaction on things that they are, concerned about or want to shine a line on or express gratitude. It's a place where their voices are able to be heard. Parent volunteers are also used during the bike rodeo season, which typically happens on the fall season, though due to the pandemic, if you guys remembered, we had to do it. There were 2 still in each separate fiscal year, but there was one rodeo done right after the other, which has never happened before. So that was new. But during these bike rodeos, where we teach 3rd graders about bike safety through courses and classes before they go onto the blacktop at schools, but it's parent volunteers that show up for that 3rd grade class, where there's a lead parent who steps up. There are parents from the 3rd grade classes that show up, and they are, at these courses, either being a pedestrian or a demonstrator on a bike. We also have PAPD that shows up to learn how to make a right turn when you're leaving a driveway, for example. They definitely are there to help students. And we also teach with the parents about how to look left from your shoulder, because a lot of students, believe it or not, it's easy for us to look left, but you tell them left, they'll turn right, and you have to kind of guide them to know that, how to do that interaction. And it's thanks to those parents that make that possible. So this is where I'm saying that parent volunteers are a big important component to the Safe Routes to School program.
Thank you.
Commissioner Cribb?
Following on Commissioner Oche's question, how many volunteers are involved in this program?
Oh, I can't think of the number right now, but I'm sure just on a year, it could be about, I would say, including the bike rodeo, gosh, I think over 100. I just, we have at the individual, if we're talking about individual school, right, we have the parent lead, we have parents that show up for a class. It might not be all of them, but I would say, let's say 15, let's say just for school, and then times the elementary schools that are available, there's your number on just the rodeo. And then the TSRs that represent each of the schools, elementary, middle school, and high school, are also the other volunteers that are part of this. So definitely, I just can't think of the exact number, but a lot. Yeah.
So in other words, lots of volunteers are needed.
Yes.
For the
So
program.
this is how we make this program successful. Our parents, for sure, and our school district that works with us.
Okay, thank you. I had 2 other questions just to clarify. Do you track the number of bike accidents every year at the schools or not? Did I hear that you don't know?
I don't track that. I believe PAPD tracks that. So that information is given to us for that year, or for when I'm running the report. So I'm not the one tracking that information. Okay. It is PAPD.
What kind of plans do you have to try to reduce the number of car trips for this year for all the elementary, high school, and middle school, where we're declining in bike trips?
As stated before, we are looking at definitely, like, we recently purchased a bike blender, which we are using as an incentive for parent PTA to bring to different events at middle schools and high schools, to definitely have students come over and then discuss education, especially sharing with us, the Safe Routes to School team and parents about, for example, what their route was like and showing us where did they go through today? Did they bike, walk? Some of them, might say, oh, I live like 2 blocks away, but I usually am dropped off by vehicle. But we demonstrate to them like, oh, you're not too far from the school, and you could definitely consider biking or walking. And we, for example, they might say, I don't have a helmet. We provide helmets for the students so they can have a helmet and show them how to wear those helmets, so they may be encouraged to bike to school. Or some others would say, I'm close enough, I can walk. And I'm like, that's great. So it's usually, what we do now, and we are trying to increase that. But we're, like I said, we are in the need of those volunteers, and we're just seeing those numbers not being there. So we are discussing that with PTA and PAUSD on sort of our involvement with the schools and ensuring that those events continue. But as I stated before as well, we are scoped for elementary schools. So, the middle and high school is much harder for us to do. And without those volunteers doing that work, because we provide the material, we provide the bike, we could provide some guidance, but we cannot, the amount of time, we're sometimes at capacity. So we're looking at the needs and capacity assessment to see if the city can find additional resources to help kind of guide where we can go. So we're trying to work with what we've got at this time.
Okay, well, my one last question is, how can the commission help you?
I think definitely to get the word out, especially sharing our website and information about our website is crucial. I think it provides a lot of information that a lot of people might not know about, especially the walk and roll maps. I think sometimes they might be bypassed. And I think as much as the information that we can do of providing that information is crucial. And I think also just, I would say encouraging others to kind of model that behavior about riding a bike, walking, and wearing your helmet, and just ensuring that, you signal or learn, the Bicycle Coalition provides information on how to signal, and that stuff is on our website as well. But definitely getting the word out about, just being safe, I guess, in that sense of like wearing the helmet and being visible is key.
Well, thank you very much. And I want to thank you for all the work that you all are doing. As a parent who had children ride across El Camino and across the train tracks to get to middle school, and always happy when they were coming home on their bicycles safe and sound. This is really important stuff. And I hope that you let us know what we can do to assist in getting the word out. So thank you.
No problem. Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much. I just have one quick question for you. Because first of all, I say thank you for the beautiful data slides. It's very satisfying for us to look at all of the charts with the historical data, but I'm sure a lot of work and volunteer hours go into actually getting the data and compiling it. So thank you for that work. You talked about the 5-year plan update and the progress you've made. It seems like you're nearing the end of that. What is the process for the next 5-year plan, or whatever timeframe you're looking at, and who's involved in that creation of that plan?
Yeah, no problem. And thank you. And I also wanted to note that I'm not the only one who works in this. And basically, I'm standing on the shoulder of giants, Kathy Durham and Penny, who've also been involved, and just, again, parents who've brought this to the attention. And I'm just glad to be part of this and helping, families understand the need of biking and walking to and from school. Regarding the 5-year plan, that plan was developed in part with the parents or the transportation safety representatives and the city, with involvement with PAUSD. Yes, it is nearing the end. There's conversation about if we want another 5-year plan, or do we want something different? That is sort of what's going to happen this next 2023, 2024 year is to discuss this further to say what's next. So that's where we'll be. And it might be that same interaction between the TSRs of that year and the school district.
Great, thank you.
Vice Chair, there's one hand raised from the
Okay.
public.
Sure, okay. We go to public comment.
Vice Chair, we have one hand raised. Let me get that up and running. 1 second. Debbie, you've been unmuted. You now have 3 minutes.
All right. My name is Debbie Chauso. I'm not good with tech. Okay. I live next to Fletcher School, South Palo Alto. We lived there for 37 years. Okay. We understand that Cubberley has, the city has invited proposals for a swap to exchange acreage at Cubberley for Terman Park.
Debbie, is this related to safe routes to school?
No, but not specifically, but I'll say why I'm talking. And then if you want to cut me off and tell me no, okay? I'm talking because we don't see a city council meeting scheduled for almost several months. We are a huge constituency that use Terman, want to keep Terman, and we don't know how to be heard. Okay, where else to be heard? Can I add my 2 minutes? Is that because it's
This is the time to have public comment on the safe routes to school item. I think if you have comments for the commission, you can send us an email through our website or reach out to staff, and we will have someone get back to you.
okay? All right. Well, thank you.
Thank you. Any other hands raised?
I'm seeing no more hands raised, Vice Chair.
Great. Any other final commission comments before we? Thank you, Jose. Really appreciate it.
No
And
problem.
Forward to seeing you again in the future.
Till then, take care.
Okay, moving on to Foothills Nature Preserve General Status Update.
All right, thank you, Vice Chair. Again, Darren Anderson with Community Services Department, and with me is Mike Warner. He's the Foothills Nature Preserve Supervising Ranger. And Mike's been with the city since January 2022 and has just been a terrific asset to the Open Space team. I'm really glad to have you here, Mike. I want you to know Foothills is in great hands with Mike and his team. We're going to share some updates on the 2022 visitation to the preserve. We'll cover information on entry passes, ranger calls for service, enforcement issues, information about the various capital projects that will happen in the preserve, some updates on our restoration and volunteer partner organizations, Grassroots Ecology, Environmental Volunteers, and the Friends of Foothills. And Tyler Feld, the project lead for Grassroots Ecology, is on the Zoom call with us, and we'll speak to a couple slides later in the presentation. And I saw that Alex von Feld, the co-executive director of Grassroots Ecology, is on as well. So grateful to have both of them. We start with the Foothills visitation. There were approximately 202,000 visitors to the preserve in 2022. 64,000 we had in the previous year, 2021. The average visitation during the 5 years prior to opening to the general public, again, that's 2015 to 2019, was about 143,000 a year. And that had felt sort of consistent for a long time. And then when we opened to the public, it was that big jump. Foothills Nature Preserve opened to the general public on December 2020. And then this is just information to help explain some of these changes might be associated with the fees, for example, that we began charging in February 2021. That was the vehicle entry fee on weekends and holidays. And the reason for just being the weekends and holidays is that's when we staff the entrance station. On the weekdays, we don't have anyone there. And it wasn't until January of this year that we began the vehicle entry fees on weekdays via an automated machine that we added. And this slide shows the visitation from 2002 to 2022. And you can see during this 20-year span, 2021 was the high with 294,000 visitors. This slide is the monthly visitation, and similar to prior years, the monthly visitation in May through August remained the most popular months. However, January and May 2022 had approximately the same visitation as the prior years. And nearly 50% of all the visits to the preserve take place on weekends. 22.7% on Saturdays, 23% on Sundays, 12% on Fridays, and Monday through Thursday is less than 10% per day. In 2022, there were over 1,000 visitors to the preserve on 50 of the 113 weekend or holiday days. That figure, 1,000 visitors for the day, sometimes it's hard to get a feel. You know, we're talking about a 1,400-acre preserve. It feels busy when you've got 1,000 visitors, especially from the staff perspective that's managing the entrance. 1,000 is a busy day. So we had 50 of those. In 2021, there were 90, so fewer of those really busy 1,000 plus days. The vehicles in the preserve basically track the visitors, so there's a lot of commonality in that. There were approximately 107,000 vehicles that entered the preserve in 2022, and that's a decrease of 30% from the 154,000 that were there prior year. There were no preserve closures due to reaching capacity limits in 2022, and the last preserve closure that we had due to capacity was back in April 2021. And this is the slide that shows you those vehicles, again, from 2002 to 2022. This slide, we're looking at the comparison of the different number of passes from comparing 2021 to 2022. And rather than read them all, just let you look at that slide for a second to see the different changes. And while you're looking at that, maybe I could just explain some of the different kinds of passes we've got. We have a number of free annual passes that are available to people. That's active members of the United States military or veterans of the armed services. Students in the 4th grade may apply for a free annual pass. People with developmental hearing, speech, and visual, and mental and physical disabilities, and low-income visitors all have opportunities to get free annual passes. We have discount passes, and we also have free days and free passes available through the library. So a number of different opportunities for people to get in the preserve at low cost or no cost. And this slide shows you the different percentages. So 80% of the visitation was that $6 vehicle entry fee that people are paying either at the machine or through the gate as staffed. But for the free entries, it's about 7% of all the entries there. And you can see the breakdown of the different groups. And the annual pass represented 13% of all the different entries. Dogs are not allowed into foothills on weekends and holidays, and this is the dog turnaways. We had 366. This is where someone comes to the preserve, they've got their dog, and the staff person says, I'm sorry, they're not allowed. We track those. 2021. And here's a graphic showing, again, 2002 to 2022. And again, that peak year of 2021 with 866, where we had a lot of new visitors to foothills who weren't familiar with the rules and brought their dogs. And I'm going to turn over to Mike Warner to help with these next few slides.
Thank you, Darren. Good evening, commissioners. In 2022, the Rangers called for service. We had 36 calls for service. Generally, what a call of service is basically it's either a dispatch from Palo Alto Fire involving either a medical emergency or traffic accident, either in the preserves or on Page Mill Road. These also cover any visitor reported violations or issues going on within the preserve. So that's something that's needs to be addressed by staff immediately. In 2022, it was up by 20% from 30 calls within 2021. kind of a preview for this year. So far, since January to June, the Foothills Rangers have responded to about 30 calls for service, which is about 84% of the load from 2022. Once again, as I clarified earlier, this for vehicle accidents, medical calls, lost hikers, and visitor reported violations. This also includes about 4 days of operations where we supported Palo Alto Public Works when we had snow on Page Mill Road and Highway 35, assisting residents in clearing the roadway and getting vehicles stuck out of ditches up on Page Mill Road. Also during that time, we had, I believe, at least 3 search and rescues for folks who went hiking up to reach the snow and got lost while they were out. I tried to have enforcement of the daily fee just as a preview graphic, but the data, because of our closure of Arastadero to dogs and then some other priority projects for the Foothills Fire Mitigation Plan, we just haven't had the time to compile that data. But hopefully later on, I will be able to provide that data to you about the compliance with the daily entry fee. Overall, though, with enforcement, since the beginning of 2022 or throughout 2022, I should say, Foothills Rangers issued 28 citations in the for the open space code violations within the Foothills and Arastadero preserves. 21 of those citations were issued at Foothills Nature Preserve, and I have the breakout there, just to highlight of it. 7 were for smoking. That was in the area of Vista Hill, where we were getting complaints from preserve visitors regarding folks either smoking or littering, mainly in the evenings. And so we spent some time concentrating patrols in that area. And then the other majority of it was for bicycles on trails within the Foothills Nature Preserve, and then moving down towards speeding vehicles or vehicles driving off roadways within the preserve. So driving in the grassy areas. And then dog off leash, and then vandalism. Overall, also the Rangers issued 290 written warnings, both in the Foothills and Arastadero Nature Preserves. And the graphic might be a little hard to read, but I can describe it. So majority of those, the large blue slice of the pie, is about 115 violations for after hours use. And this is not just someone who was a couple minutes late getting out of the preserve. This is someone who's at least 45 minutes or so late exiting the preserve, or they've come in after the park is closed. Most of the time it's hours after the park has been closed. And this is important to enforce because of our wildlife that we do have in the park. They're very sensitive to disturbances at night, and folks up there with flashlights or playing music or even chatting loud can disrupt their natural patterns. The other large majority slice in there, the orange slice, is for dog off leash. And so that's makes up about 29% of the written warnings that were issued. And then as we go down, just a couple highlights, there were 3 written warnings issued for e-bike or one wheel on trail, 15 for smoking. Most of those were probably outside of fire season. Hence they weren't issued citations, but they were just given a written warning. And then the remaining percentage is kind of scattered between parking warnings, shortcutting trails, illegal camping, and other miscellaneous violations. For the 2022 was also the first fire season. In 2022 was the first year where we implemented recommendations from the Palo Alto Fire Department. These recommendations included no barbecues on red flag days, reducing actually the number of barbecues at Orchard Glen and throughout the park, prohibiting barbecues in open flame at our campground toll camp, and then also placing signage to direct folks on how to properly dispose of their charcoal after they've been barbecuing. So to reduce the number of dumpster fires that we were having at the park. And we made it through all last summer without any dumpster fires. So that was kind of a good sign. People are following the signage. We consult with the Palo Alto Fire Department every summer. So this summer we also consulted with them, and they say they want to keep the existing regulations in place. And so that's what we've moved forward with this season. In addition to that, we're currently working in the fall of 2022. We worked with CAL FIRE, Palo Alto Fire, Public Works, and I believe Santa Clara State Fire Council at one point to clear and create or maintain our fire break along Page Mill Road, and that's about a 30-foot buffer zone on either side of the road as you go up Page Mill to help create a space where folks who live further up on Page Mill Road, they can evacuate safely down to the town, to the city, and also have a way to check fire from either Foothills Nature Preserve or if it's in Hidden Villa or Black Mountain areas from crossing Page Mill Road. So that took about 6 weeks, and staff was heavily involved in that. But it's a great project, and it had a great outcome and a lot of feedback, positive feedback from the community. And then additionally, Darren and I have been also working on eucalyptus tree removal grants to try to remove. We have about 500 eucalyptus trees that we're trying to remove between the Foothills Nature Preserve, Arastradero Nature Preserve, and Esther Clark Park.
Excellent. Thanks, Mike. I'll talk about some of the capital projects that we've got planned. High level here and more detail coming, especially on the Buckeye Creek one, which is a little confusing and begs for more explanation. So the Buckeye Creek grade control structures, the creek, which flows throughout Foothills Nature Preserve, had in the 70s and 80s these structures that were added to slow down water. They've exceeded their lifespan and need to be replaced. So in fiscal year 2027, with the design and permitting for them, and then the construction the following year for the replacement. There's a pedestrian bridge to Los Trancos Valley. This is directly across from the Interpretive Center. And again, I'll point this out in the map momentarily to help explain where this is. That one, same time frame, design permitting 27 and 28, the construction to replace it. The Sunfish Island Bridge, this is over at Baronda Lake. And that one's this year, repairs to that one. So that'll occur this fall. That'll be a much smaller scale project. It'll mainly be staff and a contractor working on that one with just replacing some damaged timber that needs to be replaced. And then the Baronda Lake dock replacement. So this is where the people come and launch canoes from. And that's planned for next year, fiscal year 2024, for construction of that dock. Then we've got the restrooms. These are the 3 exterior restrooms, so not inside the Interpretive Center. The design of all 3 would happen in fiscal year 26. The construction of Orchard Glen restrooms, that's next to the Orchard Glen picnic area, in fiscal year 27, followed by Oak Grove the following year. Usually they'll be rehabilitated or replaced depending on assessment. And these are slated in terms of need, both on the use and the current condition of those restrooms. So the Orchard Glen is the one that's in the worst condition and the one that's gets the most use and so forth down the line. And then lastly, the pedestrian trail, split rail fencing, parking, crosswalks, speed humps improvement project. These ones are all aimed at addressing the increase in visitation that happened when we opened up. And we had interim measures. So we've got temporary fencing out, for example, it's just T-stakes and rope or flagging. That was effective in stopping the problem, but really unsightly and has to be replaced a lot. This project would change that out with split rail fencing, which matches everything else we have in the preserve that we've always used. The parking, this would not be an increase in parking, but rather fixing the existing parking, which is poorly designed. It really fit the park when you only had 140,000 visitors. Once you got to this amount and you have pedestrians walking along the road, it's less effective. And I think it can be reorganized. And that's what we're going to suggest in this particular project, which will come to the commission for review potentially very soon. So the design is happening now, and I think that may come either next month or the month following to the commission, and then construction in fiscal year 2024. Now, I'm going to try my best just to point out these areas. so you can be familiar. So this is the entrance gate to Foothills. And there's a restroom right there. There's a little restroom icon. So that's the entrance restroom. And that would be one that's going to get replaced. This is the Orchard Glen picnic area. And you can see the restroom icon there. That's the restroom for that spot. And lastly, the restroom at Oak Grove picnic area down in this area. I'll have another slide that shows this in more detail, but the Buckeye Creek grade control structures, it flows from up by Toll Camp along Wild Horse Valley and along the main Las Trampas Valley and all the way through the 7.7 acres area at this portion of the park and then out of the preserve. So there are grade control structures throughout that whole length that would be replaced in that project. Sunfish Island Bridge is right over here at Baronda Lake and connects to this little island. And the pedestrian bridge that I mentioned is directly across from the interpretive center, right at this trailhead. And I'll have a photo of that in a second. You can see it. I'm sorry, this is not the most helpful map. We'll talk a little bit about Buckeye Creek hydrology study. This was a study that staff completed in 2017. In 2018, it went to the council. And it looked at some problems with this creek, long-standing problems. I mentioned those grade control structures were added in the 70s and 80s for the same problems that we're having now, that sedimentation would wash down the creek and either cause flooding or deep standing cuts. And those were efforts made back then to address it. They weren't fully successful, and they still aren't now. So that's why we conducted this analysis. So during heavy storms, that sediment washes down cuts, and a lot of those eroded sediments deposit in different areas, but mainly the 7.7 acre parcel. And I'll show you a photo momentarily of that spot. And it can, again, lead to flooding and obstructed culverts that impact neighbors downstream of us too, significantly. And so we regularly hear from them, hoping that we're doing our due diligence to clean out the sediment when necessary. And there are 12 of those grade control structures in Buckeye Creek, 8 in Wild Horse Valley, 2 in Las Trampas Valley, and 2 in the 7.7 acre area. So this study had a preferred alternative, a recommendation, if you will, for how they could restore portions of the creek by widening the creek channel to create seasonal wetland floodplains in the lower reaches. That's the Las Trampas Valley, which is across from the interpretive center, and the 7.7 acre area as well. And then in the upper stretch of the creek, it was to create a new creek channel in Wild Horse Valley, and then retrofit those grade control structures and replace that pedestrian bridge. So the total cost of this preferred alternative was, at the time, again, this is 2017 dollars, was $9.5 million. So the Parks and Rec Commission considered this plan, analyzed it, and in January of 2018 voted unanimously to recommend that council direct staff to pursue funding to do just the upper portion. That's the one in Wild Horse Valley that would create the new creek channel and then replace those existing grade control structures. And the cost of that project at that time was about $3.7 million. And the two key factors in the commission's recommendation at that point was we had a really significant capital budget deficit that the city was dealing with. And the fact that the new creek channel, that upper creek improvement, would resolve about 50% of the issues, according to the contractor who helped do the analysis of the erosion and sedimentation. So back to that same trail map, this red outlined area is the study area. So you've got it right up by Toll Camp on the upper section, flowing down through Wild Horse Valley, through Las Trampas Valley, and then that little green section at the bottom is what we refer to as the 7.7 acre area. These are photos of the grade control structures. And this is the wooden grade control structures you can see on the left and right. And again, they've exceeded their lifespans. We did have them analyzed because the recommendation was to replace them within 5 years. When the study was done in 2017, we did talk to the engineers and Public Works Engineering to give us a fresh analysis. Can this wait? Because again, our construction estimate for this would be 2028. So still a significant wait. And they believe that is the case, that they can make it. This on the left is that pedestrian bridge across from the interpretive center. And you can see that deep down cutting that the creek has done over many, many years. And it's also started to expose some of the footings on that bridge itself, which is part of the reason why it needs to be replaced. And then on the right side of the screen, you can see a lot of the heavy water flow in the 7.7 acre area of Buckeye Creek. And then this is a different section, slightly different grade control structure. These ones are gabion structures, and they're rock wrapped in thick wire cage. And they are also similar to the wood ones at the end of their lifespan and need to be replaced. This rendering shows all three of the different improvements. So at the top left where my cursor is, that's the 7.7 acre area. And the green, the light green pullout would be, if you can imagine, the existing creek is pretty narrow, let's say 8 to 10 feet wide. And this would be stretching out, widening it, allowing water to flow out and have space to spread. Similarly, in this middle section of the Las Trampas Valley, again, across the way from the interpretive center, the same thing, widening it out into what's a turf area, it's just grass, and having a meandering space to what is now a very channelized creek, which is again only about 8 to 10 feet wide. Now it would have this far more space to spread out, slow out the water, and reduce the erosion and sedimentation issue. And then lastly, that upper stretch where you see that thick green squiggly line, that would be the new creek channel that would be built. And that would help take a lot of the water runoff that comes off the hills and currently flows down again, the very channelized section of the existing Buckeye Creek. And then lastly, this is the close-up of the area that the PRC had recommended back in 2017, 2018. And you could see it in more detail. Moving on to a different topic. This is related. This is the Buckeye Creek clean out of the 7.7 acre area. So the reason we did this study, all that sedimentation comes down and it deposits in this part of the preserve and it builds up. And unless you remove it, the water will flow over or send the sediment down, clogging and causing flooding downstream into our neighbors further down. So staff has been working with the Regional Water Quality Control Board and other agencies. The Water Quality Control Board is the last remaining agency we need to get the permit from to do the clean outs. Mitigation will be required, and we hired a consultant to help look at this and offer suggestions, which we've shared with the Water Board, and they agreed to permit this pending our commitment to do partners of Grassroots Ecology to develop the plan. But basically, it would be to remove some of the eucalyptus saplings that are along the creek and to plant some native vegetation along there as well. This is a couple drawings to help show the sedimentation you can see piled up here on this photo on the left that all comes down, washes down from the upper section of the creek and deposits in this area. And further down this same creek, if you look further down here, here's a shot of where the eucalyptus saplings are. These are actually regrowths of very old eucalyptus that were cut down prior to my joining the city. So probably in the very early 90s, late 80s, those eucalyptus trees were cut down, and this is regrowth from those. And then some that have grown and clogged the creek channel. And now I'd like to turn it over to our partners at Grassroots Ecology. And Tyler will start. And I don't know if Alex will be participating, but Tyler, if you wouldn't mind taking over. Thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, thanks for having us, Darren. Hello, everyone. I'm the project lead with Grassroots Ecology at Foothills Nature Preserve. We have been stewarding at Foothills Park, I believe, since 2011. Alex, correct me if I'm wrong. And just some overall updates of this last year. So far, we have installed 330 plants, expanding the lawn replacement project in Las Trampas Valley. And then because of all the winter storms, we've been adding a lot of willow stakes in the 7.7 acres and in a few different locations along Buckeye Creek. And those winter storms allowed for a much higher success rate in those willow stakes, where we take pieces of willow trees and put them in the ground where they'll reroot. And then we've conducted about 3 surveys for the Western leatherwoods throughout the preserve. For those who are unfamiliar, the leatherwood is a rare plant that's only found in the Bay Area. And it is very common at Foothills Nature Preserve, specifically on the steep hillsides surrounding Wild Horse Valley. And we've been seeing a lot of healthy populations that are spreading through their root systems and have been mapping them on the website CalFlora. We've been having a regular cohort of high school students, who we refer to as our youth stewards, that have been assisting in our restoration of efforts, planting native plants, preparing next year's planting area by sheet mulching, removing invasive plants, weeding, and any other tasks that come to mind. And we've been managing populations of some key invasive species that are listed right here throughout the preserve, specifically focusing in Las Trampas Valley and Wild Horse Valley and a few other key areas. And some new things that have come up this last year, especially, is that because of those winter rains, a lot of our seeding efforts were especially successful with native wildflowers, lupins, yarrows, and poppies in the 7.7 acres. And Buckeye Creek, which has been flowing nonstop since January, which has been really exciting. Last year, we only saw it flow for 1 or 2 days, and now it's been flowing for about 6 months nonstop. And then on the next slide, we have some of our community engagement key highlights from this year. So every year we host 2 Watershed Stewards Program AmeriCorps members for a 10-month term going from October through August. And these are usually young individuals who are fresh out of college, who want to get a foot in the door in the environmental field. So they come join us for a 10-month period where they get to learn about the habitat restoration projects that we have going on and participate in all the stewardship over the preserve. This year especially, we've held 16 volunteer events, 18 of those youth steward sessions that I was referring to earlier, and they have contributed over 1,100 hours, and we've had over 350 volunteers with us. And we are currently hosting a cohort of summer with the California Naturalist Certification Program. And they are meeting regularly at Foothills to do education and get this naturalist certification while also assisting in our restoration efforts. Another really big highlight is that we have been hosting affinity events across several grassroots ecology sites. And at Foothills Nature Preserve, we have hosted 2 LGBTQ+ restoration and education events. One of them was put on by one of those AmeriCorps members, specifically honoring Transgender and Non-Binary Day of Visibility. And then recently we just led a Pride and Biodiversity Walk to celebrate Pride Month. And this year, especially at the beginning of 2023, we implemented a new survey to get our volunteer feedback and get the best quality feedback we can to provide high quality programming. And one of our key questions is asking, what is grassroots ecology good at? And here is a quote from one of our volunteers about specifically this event held by our AmeriCorps member, creating a safe space that's welcoming for all volunteers and explaining how the work we're doing is having a meaningful impact on our environment. And then as you can see by these statistics below, most of our volunteers are feeling really like their work is having a positive impact on their local ecosystems, and about half of our volunteers are repeats. So it's really great to see these familiar faces who keep coming back and are really excited to engage in the work that we're doing. Alex, is there anything you would like to add about what we've been up to?
Thanks, Tyler. I think the only thing I can think of adding is, first of all, just wanted to thank Tyler and his team for doing such a great job out there, and working with all of the volunteers, especially the youth. And he was there during the pandemic, and we were doing all sorts of just programs just for high school students. It was really great. And then I'd also like to thank the Rangers. We've, been partnering with them for years at the site. It's actually been there since 2014. And the Rangers have been a great partner, and we really appreciate it. So thanks.
Thank you, Alex, Tyler. Really appreciate it. And of course, our partnership, but with grassroots ecology is so valuable to the city. We're very grateful. I don't have a representative today from Environmental Volunteers, so I'll just talk about some of the highlights they've shared with us. They started the Trail Ambassador Program in 2021, and this was again in response to opening the preserve to the general public and wanting to do a good job of welcoming new visitors to the preserve that hadn't been there before. And you could orient them to the preserve, give them heads up on different things to enjoy and look out for that are really fun to see, and also some cautionary things, what poison oak looks like, please stay on trail, no bikes here, that kind of thing. And it was really effective and very helpful. They had one staff member that would host a table at Baranda Lake on Saturdays, and they'd educate visitors. And that is probably the most commonly visited spot in the preserve, especially on weekends. It just seems to be a magnet. People love to go by the lake. And that's where they've had the most success of getting people to stop by and chat with them. They explained they interact with about 30 to 50 people each day at those tables, but they also have volunteers that they've trained and worked with to walk the trails. So you might remember long ago we were having, probably still do to some degree, have problems with bikers on these trails. And these trails and foothills are not open to bicycles, but people were doing it anyway. And so we thought, in addition to people biking, they were also taking shortcuts. So taking the fastest route, sometimes going through vegetation that we didn't want people doing, which was widening trails in a few spots. And so this was an effort to help address that. And they did a really good job of spreading the word. And I think gradually, along with some encouragement from rangers in uniforms with badges to say, hey, we really need you to stay on trail, and you may not have your bike on this trail. That's helped address a lot of those problems. So they're also looking to expand that tabling that they do on Saturdays to Sundays. That hasn't happened yet, but they're working towards it and looking forward to that expansion. And then they've got a teen docent program that will be active this summer. Unfortunately, I don't have a lot of details, and I'm sure you'd like more, but Foothills, another wonderful organization partnership we've got. They're small group in terms of numbers, but mighty with their passion and dedication. They really focus on invasive weeds. That's their forte, but they've branched out beyond that and done some other infrastructure improvements. But on their invasive weed control management, they do the first and third Wednesdays of each month doing this program where members of the public are welcome to join. And they're always looking for more members. So that's one where we talk about what can the commission do. Well, help spreading the word on that would be very valuable to help support this important work that the Friends do. They've cleared and reduced invasive weeds from a number of different areas of the preserve. And what I love about their group, they were there and active when I joined the city in 1999. And one of the first things I got assigned was to go help one of these dedicated volunteers just pull weeds. And I did it all day. We sat on the face of the dam and pulled hemlock. And they're just so passionate and dedicated. 8 hours without blinking. It's just sitting there and pulling weeds. They're fantastic. They remove poison oak from trails. This is poison oak that's overhanging and going to hit people. So that's rough work. They built and installed, this is a fairly recent one, 20 redwood log seating areas. So natural seating areas right along the edge of a trail in a few key locations in partnership with the rangers. That was a great project. A little while longer ago, they restored the 3D model of the preserve that's in the Interpretive Center. And that was, gosh, I don't know how long ago that was originally built, but I'm imagining very early on in the creation of the park, at that time Foothills Park, and they rebuilt that several years ago and beautified it. They performed some repairs to Sunfish Island Bridge, and they're basically custodians and guardians of the preserve. They're keeping their eye on a little bit of everything. They reach out to Mike and to me and say, hey, we've got some ideas, very collaborative and willing to partner with us. Every once in a while, we've got something in hand, and they say, great. Just wanted to make sure you're on it, which is an awesome thing to have in a partner. And other times we say, that would be wonderful if you could help with XYZ project. And And then, as I mentioned before, volunteers are always welcome, and their website is listed here for more people to come and sign up and learn about their programs. And Vice Chair, that concludes the presentation.
Thank you, Darren, Mike, Tyler, and Alex. That's it. That's wonderful. Let's start with clarifying questions, then we'll go to public comment and come back to the commission. So any burning clarifying questions? All right, do we have any hands raised?
I'm seeing no hands raised, Vice Chair.
Great. All right, bringing it back to the commission, and we'll begin with our Foothills liaison, Commissioner Kleinhaus.
Thank you, everybody, for the amazing work that is being done at Foothills. I frequent that park and love it. I have a couple of questions. Do you monitor any other special status species other than DIRCA?
And that might be a good one for our partners at Grassroots if they have any feedback on monitoring other special status species other than the DIRCA.
We don't monitor, this is Alex, by the way. We don't want to monitor any other special status species per se. We always, are aware of like the dusky-footed wood rat that's up there, and before we do any workday, we look and see if it's there, and then keep volunteers away from them. We do some other vegetation monitoring, but more has to do with monitoring the weeds, so not special status, but we want to make sure that we track our progress.
Thank you, Alex.
So I found Monolopia over there. Is that, yeah, Monolopia gracilis, I think it's called, gracilens. It's woodland woolly threads. That's a special status species. And I can show you where it was. You won't find it on INAT because they hide it, they mask those species. But I was thinking that where that one was, there might be more, and that would be a good place to do some vegetation. Deal over there. It's on those troncos in the backside. So it's not easily accessible, like, it's not where you can just drive and drop people off, but it's an important plant. So that was one question. And I guess my question to Darren about cleanup of Buckeye Creek in the 7.7 acres. The pictures you showed is natural what creeks do. They create this transport of sediment one place to the other, and that's how they function. And it's really important to allow them to function that way. So I'm not sure why you want to do this sediment cleanup in a place where there should be sediment moving around with the creek.
Yeah, that's a good question. And I should have prefaced this that actually the sediment creek clean out stuff is nothing new. It's actually been happening for like 30 to 40 years because of this long-standing channelization of Buckeye Creek, which has led to this excessive sediment, I think way beyond what you would call normal sedimentation deposition. And it has resulted in, not might, but has resulted in problems downstream when we either have missed or not cleaned it out in the past. So I totally agree that there are certain normal functions of creek, and some sedimentation is part of that. In this particular case, because we've got, that's why we have the remediation recommendations that you saw from that extensive hydrology analysis to say, you've got a problem. You've got deep incising and deep cutting, sending down way too much sediment. And if you had a more naturalized creek rather than the one that was pushed to the very edge of a hillside, in the vast majority of its stretch within the preserve, it would function more naturally, but it doesn't.
Can I add to that?
Sure.
And furthermore on that, the pictures that are highlighted right now, as you continue towards the preserve boundary, there's actually a culvert that is placed that goes underneath the private property and the homes just outside the preserve. The culvert, based on the flow and then the sediment flow, it just can't handle that and it ends up getting backed up and clogged with the sediment. So that's why that process has been taking place over the last 30 years, is to clear that, to engineer it to flow better so it doesn't back up into the homes.
So if the culvert clogs, that would flood the 7.7 acres.
It floods the 7.7 acres and then overflows into the private property as well. And then also won't allow, there's other drainage ditches that flow into that. It's kind of like the master drain that runs out to Los Trancos Woods Road. If that becomes full of sediment, then any of the auxiliary drains that feed from homes and off the roadway along Los Trancos Woods Road are not able to drain either. So they just become backed up with sediment and the water backs up to those homes.
Is the city applying for grants still to try and implement the larger project?
We haven't applied for grants for that one.
Have you asked that neighbor down the stream if they would pay for it? They can easily afford it.
That would have been great.
You know, I know how creeks function, and if there is a block and they'll find a different way. I mean, what we need in this creek is beavers, but obviously we can't bring those in. But that would have solved the problem completely. All right, I'll see if other people have questions. I may come back to solve it. Thank you.
Other commissioners? Commissioner Oshie?
Thanks, Vice Chair. Thank you very much for the informative presentation. It's also very helpful to read your remarkable achievements, especially what Grass Ecology is doing, Friends of Foothills, the Rangers, working in partnership and all of that. About the impacts that the capital improvement projects will have, especially the upcoming ones in the near future. Would there be closures? How would it impact residents? And how do we intend to communicate that effectively so residents are aware? I have several questions. I'll leave it there first.
Yeah, thank you. Great question. Varying for each project, maybe I could start with probably the least impactful, which would probably be the Sunfish Island Bridge, where I think the closure it's currently open, right? So it's not closed now. When we do the work in the fall, I'm guessing it'll be about 2 weeks. So it'll be limited access to one very small part of the preserve. I think it'll be very minor. The information will be done with signage, primarily, and some website updates and a briefing of the Parks and Rec Commission. To more impactful as we go up, the Baranda Lake dock replacement, when that one ends up happening the following fiscal year, that will be closed for, I would guess, more like triple that amount of time. So maybe a month and a half it might be while that one gets rebuilt. So a little more impactful. We do have the floating dock where our canoes are set. Maybe possible. We'll have to figure out that a little bit. We haven't discussed that part yet. But that one I think would be an impact to some of the folks that come and bring their own canoes. We'll do plenty of advanced warning so people know in advance not to bring their canoes temporarily while we get that up and running, and do some good communication with those folks. The pedestrian bridge at Los Trancos Valley, that one will be an impact to people who use that route, that trailhead. And again, same thing in terms of just needing to communicate well in advance and have signage in all sorts of places. Someone might be making long trail connections and plan to come that way. So we've done that before with temporary closures, and we can certainly do it again and effectively communicate that. The Buckeye Creek grade control structures, I don't know the answer yet on how impactful that will be or how big a footprint the construction would require. It's still quite a ways off. I know when we talked about the bigger project, the complete replacement or creek widening for all the sections, that was going to be really impactful. The project would probably take upwards in the way of 6 months to a year for that kind of thing. And that was part of the reason that some of the commissioners voiced to me, I'd be worried if we're going to be taking such a big piece of the creek and having so much construction go on at once. You're taking a big piece out of access for the community. And so that's one of the reasons they said, why don't we start with the upper creek? If that solves 50% of the sedimentation and erosion problem, maybe that'll have far less impact as you do the work. So the grade control structures still may be impactful when we do those, but not nearly as much as what we were looking at with the bigger, broader project. The restrooms, we've got them staggered on purpose, one per year. And what we'll have to do is temporarily add some portable restrooms. For example, that first year, 2027 at Orchard Glen, I imagine we'll have 3 to 4 portable restrooms there for the community to use in the interim while that's being constructed, and then vice versa. Get Orchard Glen completely up and running and new before we begin working on Oak Grove, so that we're not taking one of these 3 really essential restrooms out of service. And then the last project there, the one that'll be coming to you soon for review, I don't think the pedestrian trail work or the split rail fence will have much impact on the community at all. I think mostly that can be done without impacting access on the roadway. Again, that trail, and you'll see far more of this when we come to you, will be right along the road's edge. And the idea is, with pedestrians walking there, we wanted to get them off the road and have a safe place for them to walk. So in most of the preserve, there's already an area where you can build a trail pretty easily. So it's more about a little bit of work and a lot of like clearing up ambiguity. It might be grass in one area, we change it to a gravel type material. The parking, I think we can phase that in a way to minimize impact yet. Not all the parking in the preserve would be touched at all. Some of it's just restriping or pulling back so you can fit a pedestrian pathway on the other side of the parking lot. Crosswalks and speed bumps, I think fairly minor. And again, I think we can stage it so that we minimize the amount of impact.
Can I go on? Okay. A wise man once said, ignorance of the law is not an excuse. Based on the violation data that you shared, I'm just wondering if it's based on, lack of awareness. Do we have like a time when we stop people from coming in, maybe close to the closing time, just to like a carrot, not just always stick, trying to encourage people to know exactly what is a violation. That's one. And then the other one I thought about was, if we are effectively, I was really fascinated, I was really, amazed to see 866 people turned back with their dogs. For me, I think it's a gap that we're not communicating effectively to people that dogs are not allowed. Do we want to close that gap by, kind of finding another way to create more awareness, because it's obvious people don't know? To be ashamed to drive all the way with your dog and then be told to go back. I feel like it's a gap that we might need to close. Also, you talked about, sometimes for emergency situations where people go missing. So I'm wondering, how do you find them? Is there enough network coverage, mobile phone coverage, security cameras? What do we do? The safety plan, what do we have in place?
Let me start by answering some of those questions, and I'll turn over to Mike to help finish and add more details. And maybe the dog turnaway is a good one. So the 866 number was actually the 2021, and predominantly those are new people coming out of COVID and wanting to go to parks when they don't really have a lot of experience. And I don't think it was a shortage of communication or education on the city's behalf, but rather driving around, I heard about this park that's now open, I'm going to go, and lack of awareness and looking out for messaging, because it's clearly marked at the entrance. So you see the drop down to 366 in this last year. So a significant drop there. And even if you look far back in 2004, we have 153. I don't know that the messaging is the problem so much. I think it's just new people coming and not being aware, but it's on the website. It's signed pretty well. and there are adjacent preserves that allow dogs. So when they're turned away, they're actually turned away either just up the hill, like a half mile up the hill to another preserve at Mid-Penn that does allow dogs, or over at our Arrestero Preserve, which normally when there aren't aggressive coyote behaviors, they can go there too. So when they're turned away, they're actually rerouted, might be the better term, to another park nearby that they can utilize. In terms of the other questions you asked, maybe Mike could help a little bit with some of the enforcement questions.
Yes, yeah. So actually, I was going to build on the dog turnaways. So what all the rangers, we take time in the booth on weekends, so we spend just about an equal amount of time as our open space technicians handling interacting with the public as they come into the park. In my experience, and it seems to be across the board with the other rangers, when people aren't sure about the dog regulations on the weekends, it's usually because they've searched on Google or Bing and just found a quick, easy answer. A lot of dog sites also like more specific, I can't think of some by example, but just specific dog-friendly sites that tell people this is an okay park to take your dog. They don't clarify. So it's not the city's website, but it's other third-party websites that are telling people, yes, it's okay to bring them on the weekend. But as Darren said, we also go, we were more than helpful most of the time is just be like, well, here's a map of Arrastradero. This is how you get to Arrastradero. There's the Burn Preserve over in Los Altos Hills. And then there's Coal Creek is the nearest dog-friendly location, and Windy Hill up on Highway 30. We do recognize that it can be extremely frustrating, especially if we have visitors coming from out of the area to visit foothills that they can't bring their dog inside. So it's something that we're continuing to work on addressing. I think also something we can maybe work on with signage in the future. And I'm working with one of our rangers right now, kind of trying to overhaul the signage a little bit at foothills so that we can better communicate what the regulations are. And building on your other question, I'll kind of start into that with at least the enforcement. How I kind of philosophy of how I view enforcement is really, it's, first and foremost, our goal is to educate, and we want people to follow the rules. That's really at our heart of what we're trying to accomplish. We want them to voluntarily follow our rules. And so mainly it's through education. The 290 or so written warnings, those are really educational contacts. And that's what I really stress with my ranger staff is that this is your opportunity to talk with them, educate them, let them ask any questions, and then come back, and try to, how can we improve ourselves, how they can improve the situation themselves. But being that as a reason why we switched from verbal warnings to written warnings is it's also holding accountability for all parties involved. So that there is a record of, this is the ranger who talked to them and educated them, but it's also holding that person say, hey, you've now been educated. And we really haven't had, in a year and a half that I've been with the city of Palo Alto, we haven't had, I would say maybe only 2 individuals out of those 290 were repeats. So rather than being repeats. So that's, to me, is very effective enforcement, is educating those folks. The citations, when it comes, for me personally, when it comes to issuing a citation, I'm looking at the intent of the individual. Did they have a purposeful intent to go out there and either destroy something in the park or do something in violation? I'm also looking at what, at least from the department's standpoint, is what have we done to prevent that from happening? Are we educating? Is there signage posted? Is there, like in the instance of people off-roading, are there rock barricades indicating you should not go driving on the tall grass in the middle of summer and spitting donuts? That's kind of, these are things that we run into. And also just generally my impression once I start talking with the person, if the person is being very rude and disrespectful, then that's also going to angle which way the contact's going to go. I don't like writing citations. That's the last thing I like to do. If I can have positive outcomes in educational contacts with everybody, that's what I would prefer to do every single time. But there's instances where a ticket has to be written. So yeah, and maybe clarify if I haven't touched on any of your questions, Commissioner.
Yeah, I was asking about safety.
Safety.
Yeah, so people getting missing, do we have
Yes.
issues with mobile phone coverage, internet?
Yeah, so both cell phone and even city provided radio coverage in the Foothills region is very sparse. I guess would be a way to put it. Cell phone especially sparse. And not only are we having issues with cell phones where people get lost because they're relying on their phone to be their map and their guide and it doesn't work, but we also have some interesting issues with zip cars now. A lot of people use their phones. That's the only way they can access their zip car, which is where they rent the car by phone. They drive it to Foothills and then it doesn't work to get back in the car. And so then the cars end up being left in the preserve because they can't, and then they need to figure out some other way of getting home. We've also had issues with folks bringing Uber or using Uber or Lyft to get to the preserve, but then they can't get back. A lot of times also now after post-pandemic, a lot of Uber and Lyft drivers won't drive into the Foothills late at night because they're worried about their safety. So they won't come up to pick up people. And so then staff has to transport people down to town to give them a chance to be able to get access. As far as the trails go, we are actively working on, we just installed 13 markers on the Los Trancos Loop Trail to improve wayfinding for the park visitors. And then we're going to expand that over the next year, upgrading the rest of the trail markers within the preserve, and then also a rastradero open space. So that hopefully combat some of the issues that we've had with lost hikers. I could think of maybe 2 of the instances though, where people were just off trail and became very lost that way, getting stuck in the underbrush. That's a little harder to mitigate. We do have tools at our disposal. I have led a couple of staff trainings recently on it because my other hat that I wear, I'm still a duty officer from Marin Search and Rescue and team lead. So I've taken a lot of what I've learned in that realm for the last 6-7 years and brought it to Palo Alto and have taught my rangers. We also have tools such as CalTopo, which is it's both a public, it has 2 sides to it. There's a public version, but then there's also a first responder version that does allow us to text individuals if they are lost and they still have cell service. I can text them and with a link and they can click it and then their location will share to a map that we can share amongst ourselves, so like the other rangers, and so we can figure out where they're at and then how do we get to them to help them, which has come in handy several times with folks getting lost in the Foothills area. And then yeah, I mean generally though the Foothills region is very safe, and we another part of my philosophy over the last 1.5 years is just to make sure we're just getting staff out on trail. And that's my biggest thing is I really want to see staff out in trail. And I think I've had a lot of positive feedback from a lot of visitors who've seen more staff out and available to be contacted just for questions, but then also just there to address violations and then also help people and come across when, people are hurt, injured, or lost.
So pardon me, the reason why I was so particular about the dog turning away was the data for 2022 was 366. And my brain interpreted that as 1 dog turned away every day. So for me, that was kind of impactful. Also, I want to ask if we could share like the Friends of Foothills, like a DRI or, someone who people can get in touch with, because I don't remember seeing like a contact person details in the updates that you gave earlier.
Just the website.
Oh, just the website.
Yeah,
I didn't see
just
that
have a website for the
as
Friends.
well.
Right down here.
No, the environmental volunteers.
Oh, environmental volunteers.
Yes.
Got it. No, I didn't have that on here.
Yeah, and then last but not the least, just to commend the grassroots ecology, they must be doing something really right for them to have, so many volunteers turn up And then the number again is also remarkable, 352 volunteers. Just to, commend them and to appreciate what they do in partnership with the city. Thank you.
Any other commissioners? Commissioner Freeman.
So I had 5 questions and Commissioner Orchard took 4 of them away, but no, just kidding. Thank you. Excellent presentation and also excellent graphics covering a lot of different areas. Kind of one of the, I just wrote this one down actually. Well, the numbers are increasing as far as the number of people who are going to the park. Has your staff, and you mentioned that you're encouraging your staff to be out more active on the trails.
Yeah.
As a result of the increased visitors, do you have enough people to, I guess, help and assist with issues if you're driving people back to town? That's
operating Foothills, Interastradero, and Esther Clark parks with 4 full-time staff, and then 4 1,000-hour part-time staff. And so like right now, if we have someone who's out sick or injured or on vacation, it really handicaps us because then we don't have anyone to cover that gap. So we could definitely use more support on the staffing side. And I mean, our biggest goal right now is to get our assistant ranger positions filled. And if we can get those filled, then it gives us a little bit of breathing room. So if someone does get sick or injured or goes on vacation, because people need to be able to take the time to heal themselves and spend time with family. We don't want them to feel like they have to be at work all the time just because we're short. So it's, that's one of my priorities right now is I really like to see those 2 positions filled.
And the other thing, I sort of, you're right about the poor cellular coverage in the foothills.
Yeah.
And more and more automobiles are getting it where you've got to use electronic keys and so forth.
Yeah.
Do you see maybe increasing the signage to alert people to that before they come?
Yeah,
I guess 2 ways. One would be
yeah.
on the website if people are going to that, and that would be also addressing the dog issue, but also letting them know that, there's a good, very poor, cell service there. So make sure that you're prepared for that.
Yeah, and the strategy I've seen used in other parks too is also something maybe we could look at adopting is all of our signage is after you already enter the park. So it's something we might need to look at is maybe repositioning that signage so that people can see it as they approach the park instead. So they have a heads up basically of what they're getting into. And yeah, for cell phone service, I think that would be very appropriate to include. And thank you for that idea.
Okay. And lastly, on slide 3, and I guess it was in 2021, there was like, and that had to do with, I think you said opening up the park, but there was a real dip in 2022. What do you think happened there?
We talked about that internally quite a bit, whether it was the entrance fee and the newness factor wearing off. When it was publicized, it was all over the news. Everyone thought, I really want to check out that formerly resident-only park. So I think that was part of the boom, and maybe that wears off a little. And I do think the fee to get in gradually started spreading, and maybe
because it seems like it started to kind of follow some of the earlier trends, like in 2011, 2012, and so forth. It's almost like it's normalizing, even though it's now been opened up to a wider audience. It's pretty interesting.
Yeah, if I can add to that, actually, could we go to the monthly? So I wanted to say, I think we started advertising around September that we were going to be going to a daily use fee. and so the signage was posted for about 3 or 4 months beforehand. And so I think that's also where you can see the kind of the monthly trend, it starts to go down as well. So maybe that might be
Could be
a cause. I don't know. I can't say for sure.
Yeah. Cool. All right. Thank you. Yep.
We're just going to go to the commissioners that haven't spoken yet. So Commissioner Cribbs.
Thank you. First of all, thank you for the presentation. It's very fun to see what's happened since 2015, and I appreciate all the data as somebody who's kind of been through this whole Foothill Park thing. So thank you for that. I also want to say that I really appreciate grassroots ecology and environmental volunteers and the Friends of the Foothill Park for just being there and doing all the great stuff that they do. So thank you all for those of you who are on the Zoom call. What's happened to the stakeholders committee that came out of the city manager's office? We had some representatives on that. Is that still moving on and looking toward the future?
It is, yeah. We're still meeting Commissioner Kleinhaus, Chair Greenfield, along with our partners at the agencies we just mentioned.
And has there been a discussion about the proposed perhaps docent situation with maybe a local community college or following on what Stanford was doing?
It hasn't had a lot of movement other than that recent thing I mentioned. This was just at the last meeting a couple of weeks ago that the EVs mentioned the teen docent program.
Okay.
Yeah, so that was new, and unfortunately I didn't get a lot of details from them on that, what it's going to look like, how are we going to be reaching out to, if it's teens, maybe it is some college too, I don't know.
So I would just love it if you would put that on your list so that we don't lose that part about the docents, because I think it's a really important thing for us to do. When we talked about what should happen at Foothill Park many years ago, there was a lot of conversation about the fee, especially on the weekdays. And I'm still wondering if there's an opportunity to revisit taking the fee away on the weekdays. And if we have the information now to know if it costs more money to collect the fee on the weekdays than it does to use the fee.
Yeah, so it's council directive now with, of course, recommendation from the PRC to implement the fees. We're still relatively new for the weekday fee. You know, it hasn't only been in effect since January of this year, so relatively short. Time. Yes, to some degree, but I think we've answered the question of, is it economically viable in terms of, are we losing money collecting it? I don't think so. So far, once we get past the investment in the machine, which of course we've already made, it seems as though we'll come out making money on the weekday entry. But if we want to revisit it, you know, just does it make sense or is it necessary? Maybe we get another year of data, and then it could be on our next year's work plan, reevaluate fees and their necessity and see if council's got an appetite to maybe do away with it if that's the wish of the commission.
But just from my personal perspective, that would be really, I think that would be really good. And then finally, the last question that I have is about youth groups from various communities. One of the reasons that we wanted to see the park open was to make sure that everybody had access to Foothill Nature Preserve. And I wondered if you had any data about kids who are coming up to see the preserve.
Yeah, might know better than me about whether we've got school groups from different areas that maybe aren't part of our regular camps, you know.
We've been getting a few more like summer camps coming up. It's part of my goal for like the next year that I want to work with some of my ranger staff, and then also the open space naturals position, which is right now I think currently assigned with the JMZ, but trying to bring that position also back into open space, and then also just like so we can do more community outreach, more public programming. But I want to say about a week ago, we also got an email from the city manager about certain grants that have been put out there that they're looking for folks to apply to. And one of the grants that kind of sparked our interest was one from the state parks, basically to fund outreach to low income and proportionally underserved communities. That would be something that I think we'd be very interested in, try to maybe do more outreach. It might be difficult to bring people, but one of our staff actually brought it up to me a couple of days ago. It might be difficult for us to, because of our limited staffing, to coordinate bringing someone to the preserve, but maybe that's something where we can partner with the city naturalist position, or even maybe the environmental volunteers, and go outside the preserve and bring the preserve to them in some way or form.
Well, that is really, that's great news. I'm really glad to hear.
It is
Yeah, would you
radar.
mind?
Yeah.
I'm sorry to interrupt. I want to just give also a little bit of info. So we have a volunteer outreach coordinator, and a big part of her job is to reach audiences that maybe we haven't worked with historically in the past. And so one of the examples after a lot of different meetings was a school group, high school students in Mountain View, Los Altos High School District. These are all first generation students that hadn't gone to whose parents hadn't gone to college. And so there's a special group within their school district, and they had certain programs for them. And so we had them up to Foothills as well as a few other of our sites on a few occasions. And probably Tyler knows more actually of different things, but that is something that we've been trying to do as well, with also keeping in mind, as Mike was saying, that the access is a little bit harder for people.
Okay, well, thank you. Thank you very much. And it sounds like if you got those positions filled, that you would be very happy with life in general. So
yes,
Darren, if there's anything that the commission can do to support that, I think we would be anxious to do that.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Commissioner Wei, do you have any questions?
All right. It's my favorite part. You've done a fantastic job. So
Thank you.
I don't have anything more to say.
Thank you.
Commissioner Kleinos?
Can you just clarify the dogs are allowed during the week and it's only on the weekend that they're not allowed?
That is correct. It's on leash during the week, and then not on weekends and holidays.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I think in our general plan, there was a potential program to have a shuttle going from potentially the senior center, maybe once a day, going up and then coming back a few hours later, or for people to be able to visit who do not want to drive or can't drive. And I was wondering if there is any potential plans of implementing that.
I have not heard any plans for that one.
Well, it's in our general plan, I'm pretty sure. It's the comprehensive plan. So maybe check and see if.
Yeah, I would be interested in following up on it.
Yeah.
That's the first I've heard of it, though.
I put that in there, so I know. And I really like the idea of telling people that there is no internet available. It's there are some areas near the gate that you can get internet, but it is spotty, so people should know about it. But I think if you're going to let people know before they come into the park, you'll have to move the kiosk in. So I'm not sure that's going to be feasible. Otherwise, you'll have huge traffic jams everywhere.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's something I think even Darren and I have discussed, is potentially looking at in the future that entry is going to have to be reworked, because it's not, when it does get overloaded, it does cause a safety concern with cars backing up onto Page Mill Road, and then people trying to turn around. So that could be something we look into down the road.
And the one comment on safety, the biggest problem that I've seen for hikers who come in and they don't know the park very well is they don't bring enough water. And I'd go back there and with trunkers and see people that are like parched and do you have any water? We always carry a little more than we need, but it's dangerous sometimes. So that's what when I think about where are the risks, there are the snakes that, I don't know if my dog got bit once and survived, it's okay. But water is a big deal. People don't know.
That's good to know from your firsthand experience. Actually, we could probably address that by putting some temporary signs out during the summer as we move into hotter weather, starting this weekend.
Maybe on the backside of like those troncos, they get up there, they're, oh, we should go straight, and they don't know how much further they're gonna have to
Yeah.
go. So that's where you see the people that have no water.
We can mention that to the environmental volunteers too, have on their table.
Mhm.
And maybe the trail ambassadors as well.
Mhm. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions, comments? All right, thank you again for a wonderful presentation. My dog has loved wonderful scenery and never gotten poison oak or anything. So wonderful gem. And thank you for a great presentation.
You're welcome.
We'll move on to ad hoc committees and liaison updates. I just thought we'd just go down the line and report on all of your assignments, just person by person. Does anyone want to volunteer to go first?
Sure.
Great, thank you, Commissioner Krebs.
Okay, so for the Wellness Center, our ad hoc has had 2 meetings. We are putting together a bit of a timeline, but we're really waiting for information from the city staff now that the budget is complete. And they have some time to work on some of the council directive questions. And then, do you want to talk about playing fields or playing fields?
No, we're good.
Oh,
I
okay.
can't remember.
Okay, so we had an excellent meeting with both the city staff and our ad hoc committee about the playing fields and vendors and questions and gathering information. So we all have assignments, and we have another meeting coming up on the 5th of July. And I think we have some really good information from some partners and people at Stanford and also the city and county of San Francisco and other people who have been there and done that and probably would be looking forward to collaborating with us, at least with our committee. So Darren, there was going to be a Google thing put together and I had asked Nellis about that. So is that?
And we're working on it.
Okay.
I'll send you some information.
I know I've got homework assignments there that I have not
No,
completed.
No, that
so
was my
I'm working
assignment,
on it.
actually.
But I mean, the next step for staff is to
Good.
develop these questions we talked about. And
Yeah, but
it's partially done.
And that wasn't to say, why don't we have this?
No,
It was
no.
just to say,
I
I think
know.
that that's what was supposed to be happening.
Agreed.
And then grant opportunities, we have been waiting, and I think Commissioner Ray will agree with me for the staff to be finished with the budget. So we look forward to another meeting as soon as that is convenient for them. That's what I have, except for liaison, but we'll come to that, back to that.
You can just report on that now, actually, Commissioner Krebs.
Okay, well, so I wanted to mention, I thought it was really great that we got a letter about aquatics, and I hope everybody read that letter, the email complimenting the aquatic staff and the pool and Tim Cheaper on the culture and just exactly how great the swim program and swim opportunities were. So I thought that was just a really wonderful letter. So I wanted to mention that. You've got Coverly.
I do.
And
Yeah.
go ahead.
Yeah, I did ask about the status of Coverly. I guess we actually had to call it earlier, but that is, the work on Gym A and B, I understand it hasn't started yet. And then there's invitations for bids that should be going out soon for the remediation work. As you guys know, Coverly's been closed now since 2020.
2022, February.
2022. So at least the work is, at least the bids or invitation for bids will be forthcoming. So we'll try and stay on top of that as well. And as I understand it, there's a closed city council session that's tentatively scheduled in August to discuss the terms of payment and transfer a portion of the of Coverly land from the Palo Alto Unified School District to the city. So we'll hopefully have more information about that, after the session starts. I can keep going? Okay. The only other thing that, as you guys know, I think it was 2 weeks ago, there was a article in I think it's in the Post that about the golfers sent an email to Lon to get an update on that. And what he said is that the steps are being taken, reminding golfers of the wetlands and out of bound areas when they start to go on the course. So we'll monitor that. They're adding more signage, adding more barriers to entry. So they're roping off areas and split rail fencing. And then they have course marshals that are reminding golfers while they're generally patrolling the course. So those are things that will be monitored to see if that can be reduced. And then staff is working with the ecology consultant on getting into compliance with the state water board. So it'll be another item that we can follow up on as well. And as for operations, the latter half of spring had a good golfing weather, which is reflected in higher utilization of the course and practice facilities. I would expect that with the warm weather coming, that we'll probably see additional increases in that. So we'll hopefully follow up at our next meeting to say that we've had less people going outside of areas where they should be. So that's all I have.
Great, thank you. I'll just add that the dog park discussions continue with the stakeholders both in North Palo Alto as well as Barron Park, and upcoming meetings on the master plan ad hoc, but nothing to report right now. So move on to Commissioner Kleinhaus.
So on the bicycle continuation from last year, the ad hoc is Nellis and I, and we met with staff to look at signage and expressed an interest in more signage that has symbols than a lot of words if possible. So we're going to wait for the next versions to look at. We started looking at trailhead bike racks, which was one of the city's council direction. And so we reviewed a large number of possibilities and narrowed it down a little bit, and are possibly planning to go visit some of those areas and take a look. There are some areas that are really simple and others that have potential problems with them. So we'll see. And we asked staff about how people respond to the directions of where they can ride electric bicycles and other mobility devices and where they are not. And it seems like most people respect the direction from the city and that education is working well. So that's actually very nice to hear. And that's all for that.
Anything else on?
I'll let you take the other one on the
Yeah.
Parks master plan.
All right, Commissioner Wei.
So Commissioner Ochi and I reach out to the Youth Council, try to start a conversation with them very soon. And on the Enjoy catalog, we try to put together a plan. Hopefully can give it to the people working on the master plan to align with your modification or development for that. Do you have anything to add?
Yes, just to say a big thank you to Commissioner Krebs for graciously doing an email intro to the Recreation Coordinator, Chris Sanchez. So we're hoping to follow up and then have discussions with the interesting Youth Council. For recreation program, we also reached out to Kayla, courtesy of Darren, for CSD programs, and hopefully would arrange a meeting to discuss further. For the ad hocs, can I go on? Yeah, with regards to the age-friendly liaison, I had a meeting with Minka and Adam Howard, courtesy of Darren again. Into making our city more age-friendly. I just wanted to call this out here because I believe the next steps will depend on what the city wants us to do and how I can best support that effort. Not to overburden staff. I know that, resources, it can be a little bit more, a lot of work to do, but just to confirm how best to go about moving the needle in the right direction to promote the age-friendly subject.
Did they provide any feedback on what they thought they were capable of?
So based on the feedback that I got, Minka doesn't think, we have enough resources in the next 3 months. Another thing that I want to call out also was the fact that I see a potential opportunity to close the gap between, seniors who can, leveraging on the fact that they're seniors who have experience, skills, knowledge, that they can pour into the youth, pass on the baton to youth. I feel that's an opportunity we could, leverage on with partner organizations. Like my late dad used to say, some people are retired, but they are not tired. So, not just there are people who want to do good in the community. So I feel it's an opportunity for us to close that gap and also provide a platform for mentorship opportunities for youth from seniors who have worked this, worked life, who will be able to share their experiences and things like that. So I am hoping that we can, possibly bring that to light and decide what we want to do in terms of that subject.
It's an excellent idea.
Then for sustainability, many thanks to you again, Darren. I had a meeting with Jeanette, the CSD coordinator for open space, parks and golf. And we had a discussion about the opportunity to pick a project and leverage on the fact that we could publicize the great work we're doing in our city. So if we do all these nice projects, but we don't get, we don't publicize or globally, talk about things that we've done that meets sustainability criteria, we won't be, speaking the language to people. So we did a brief review using the ISI's Institute of Sustainable Infrastructure. So they are like they give awards, they go through they use like a verifier to go through your project with their checklist. And then if you qualify for either bronze, gold or silver or platinum, they give you the awards. Before now, I think last year I had started a correspondence with the organization and they're happy to train the city staff for free. And also they also opened a door to say, oh, if you guys want us to come make a presentation, even though we're in the East Coast, we're happy to come talk about what we do and then, open the way for projects that could meet their criteria that could be globally awarded. So it's something that I think it's a win-win for the city. When I tried to do my certification, I know I paid heavily for it. So being able to get the city staff to get it for free, I think it's a big deal. So it's something I think we need to think about too, in terms of sustainability. So that's it from me. Thank you.
Busy, thank you. Any other closing comments on ad hocs, liaisons? Okay. All right, future agenda items. Darren?
Vice Chair, one that I think could be ready for this next month would be the foothills improvements. So that CIP with the ideas. I saw a draft from Public Works Engineering. It was pretty rough, and Mike and I and the team are providing some feedback to try to get it into condition to share with the ad hoc, which would be the next step, and sort of pending that conversation, whether it's ready for this next month. So more to come. And I know the chair has talked in the ordinance discussion. I know it went to council recently and I'm not quite sure where that one's at, but that was potential on the list.
Okay, we'll check it with him.
Excuse me.
We had talked about the dog,
Yeah, the dog part, I just don't know if that, because it does
if there's time.
take some
Yeah.
staff support on that one. Not, so I don't know if it could be ready by then, but that is on the list of upcoming meetings.
Yeah.
Okay, well, we can check in with the chair and see if he had other thoughts. Any other closing comments, questions, announcements? All right, this meeting is adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you.